Good evening. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. Okay. Tom is here. Everyone is here. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's a great turnout. Wow, that's a lot of people. Yeah, Nathan, I did mention it to you. So Nathan, do you want to ask the first question to Tom? Tom, good evening. Say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Going to be fun tonight. You say a couple of hours, okay?
I think so. I mean, we'll go as long as we can, Tom. As long as you're up for it, we'll go. So as long as there's questions and you're up for it, we're good to go. So if I can ask everyone, make sure if you're not talking, have your microphones muted. Thank you very much indeed. Nathan, the floor is yours, and let's take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Tom, for being with us tonight. Well, for me, it's nighttime, but thanks for being with us. And my first question is, I'm a trauma psychotherapist, and I'm appreciating the parallels I see between trauma psychotherapy and MBT, and emphasizing the need to address one's own fears in order to grow and heal. How else can MBT's model inform a psychotherapist like me in delivering psychotherapy to patients?
Well, I would think, of course, fear is the big thing, to understand that is the driver. That is why most of us do what we do, say what we say, make the choices that we make, see and hear the things that we see and hear, and all of that. Fear is the big driver in that. But there is another aspect of it, and that is you have to have an attitude of humility and of respect for your patients, and not have the attitude that you understand or you know and they don't, and your job is to help them understand it the way you understand it. You see, that's not going to be optimal. You need to understand how they understand it. In other words, start from their reality instead of starting from your reality. If you start from your reality and then try to get them to come in to share your reality, you will not have nearly as much success if you start with their reality and try to work from that point of view and from that set of understandings, and then bring them slowly to a place where they can understand what their next step is themselves, as opposed to you tell them what their next step is and now you expect them to go do it. You see, so it's like leading from the rear rather than leading from the front, rather than the come on, follow me, you know, I'm in charge, I know where we're going. It's finding out where they need to go and why they need to go there, and helping them get rid of the roadblocks that are in front of them to keeping them from going there, giving them maybe suggestions or choices. Well, you could do this or that, and here's some ways you might approach it, but try to avoid telling them what to do and how to do it. So I'd say that's kind of a fundamental thing from MBT, is that you realize that everybody's on their own path, growing up in their own way, and they have to do it themselves within their own set of understandings of the way the world works. And to try to get them to work by your model isn't going to be very efficient. They can't do that. Even if they wanted to, they can't do that. They can do it intellectually to some extent, work to your model, but they can't really do it at the being level because it's not their model. At the being level, it just doesn't fit. So I think that would be a real key thing about how you approach your patients. And this is true, it's true for you in the mental health field. It's also true for everybody that, you know, interacts with anyone, anytime. You know, it's not just a process for mental health, it's a process for relating to other people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nathan. I have another question. We'll come back to that one later. Sheila, if you want to unmute your microphone. Before you do ask that question, I just wanted to thank Darren for all the hard work he put in putting this together. I know he's listening in the background. Thank you, Darren. Wonderful turnout. You did a fantastic job. The software is working brilliantly. So well done, mate. You had a big rebuild after a storm. Good to go on you, mate. Sheila, it's all yours. Your question for Tom.
Hi, Tom. It's great to be here, and I have to tell you that your work and your books and your videos have literally saved my life. And I have early Alzheimer's, so it's hard for me to remember a lot. So I have to keep watching them over and over again. And I know that at some point you talked about politics, and I really like what you had to say. And I'd like you to talk about it a little bit right now, because what's going on right now in the country has got me forgetting all the stuff I learned from you when I'm in really major fear. So if you could address what's going on in the country, the politics, and I know what you've said in the past really helped me. And I'm wondering, does that apply to what's happening now, or is this something that's never been seen before?
No, what I've said about how we deal with life and how we connect with life is very apropos here. And the way it works is we're here to experience, and by the way we make choices, we grow up or grow down. You know, we evolve or we de-evolve. So we're here to make choices. Now, exactly what it is we get to make the choices about often is not our choice. We don't get to have things the way we want them. Things just happen, and we have to deal with it. So when we talk about politics, particularly in the US at this time, there are a lot of people who have a lot of fear about political situation here. Well, that's not productive. That's not helpful to have that fear. That fear will lead you to poor choices. We have to accept what we get to deal with. And what we've got to deal with, you know, is pretty clear. Now we have to accept it and deal with it by good choices, not react to it out of fear. So it is what it is. Accept that, and now try to be positive. What can you learn from it? What will we all learn from it? What will the country learn from it? Take the long view, not necessarily the short view. The short view might be, oh, awful things might happen, but the long view is that in time, we'll all grow up a little because of the experiences we're going through, at least if we make good choices and don't let the fear drive us. So I'd say that the politics falls in the same category as a lot of other things that you know, people worry about. You know, we have conspiracy theorists that will give us 100 different things that we should be worried about or be frightened of. And the point is, if you deal with reality with fear and you're interacting from a point of fear, that's not productive. So I'd say, let the politics go. It is what it is. Now we get to deal with it, and that gives us an opportunity to grow up, to make good choices, to deal with what we have to deal with, and to do that fearlessly. So that would be my advice: is don't let the political situation you know, scare you. Don't let the outcome worry you. Just, it is what it is. Deal with it as you have to, and learn all the way.
Thank you.
Okay, Vanessa, if you can hear me, would you like one of your group to ask one of your questions?
Oh, I didn't have it muted. Oh, yeah, I would love to ask a question.
Okay, thanks for joining us. You have a great group up there. Tom, Vanessa, and everyone up in Canada, they will see us later on in the year, and they will see us next year at the Immersive. So great group, and nice to have them along with us this evening.
Thank you. I've had a lot of time to ask Tom many of my questions, but there are a lot of people here that really have these burning questions that they want to ask. So I'm going to throw it over to Dave. You want to ask a question? Yeah? Okay.
Tom, my name is David. I understand that you've experienced the ability to do remote viewing. I'd like to know when you first experienced this ability, this skill, this technique. And in hindsight, when there was something significant going on in your life that enabled you to achieve this.
Okay, I got most of that. We had some bad feedback. I think that maybe the mic was turned up just a little. So you want to know that, yes, I have done remote viewing. That was one of the primary ways that when I first started working with Bob Monroe, it was one of the primary ways that we tested the fact that, you know, what we were experiencing was real. We did a lot of remote viewing and then checked it to see whether or not indeed we got the targets right. And that could tell us whether we were just fooling ourselves and, you know, talking to ourselves in our imagination, or were we not? So remote viewing was a key evidential thing, and it's a good thing to do just for that reason. It's easy. It doesn't take a lot of practice to find at least some success at it. And it's very evidential. It's not that hard to set up a situation, particularly if you work in pairs. Somebody, you know, if you work with another person, they can pick targets for you, you can pick targets for them. So it's a handy way of getting evidence that you're not just talking to yourself. So yes, I've done a lot of that in the past. And your question is, when did it first occur, and how did I guess get started with it?
Yeah.
I suspect I first started with the remote viewing at Monroe Laboratories at that time, because before that I'd had lots of you know, visions or connections, but I didn't really see them in the context of remote viewing. It was just information available to me. So if I had a need for certain kinds of information or ideas, whatever, I just have an intent and there it was. And I never considered it remote viewing. It just was, information was available. And I'd had that pretty much all my life without really making any effort to obtain that or get that or practice it or anything. It just was kind of always there as far back as I can remember, maybe at, you know, 5, 6 years old. So it always seemed to work, and I always relied on it. And I had my own sources, if you will, in the non-physical that I was familiar with and could rely on to give me accurate answers. So I never even considered it as remote viewing. Then when I got with Bob and we were doing these experiments or tests to see whether or not we could remote view, then I really got a different picture of it. And I just was limited then to going to see places on this planet, because that's all the targets we did at that time. That's what remote viewing was. You would remote view, which means you looked at from, you know, from where you are, you looked at remotely some scene, and then you report on that scene and see whether you got it right. So remote viewing then was just about looking for information about a point somewhere on the earth. And it wasn't until later, when I understood the concept of consciousness a little better, that I realized it really wasn't any different to what I'd always done all my life in remote viewing. It's all really about the same. What you do when you remote view is you're getting data from a database. You're having an intent. You intend to get certain data. That data comes, and then, you know, it's yours. You report it, or you understand that the data, or you come back and ask for more data if you don't think you understood it. And that really wasn't any different. Remote viewing is just accessing data that's in the database, and the data of physical events, the data of places on the earth, is a very, very small portion of all the data that's available. You can get data that goes into the past. You can remote view to the past. You can remote view into the probable future. You can ask things that really don't have anything at all to do with this planet or this universe. And you can remote view in the non-physical space, if you like, as opposed to just physical space. Remote viewing is just a query system. It's like Google. You have an intent, and that's what creates your query. Your intent has to be very precise, just what you want, and it has to be clear. And just like with Google, sometimes it takes a while before you get the right intent. You know, when you Google something, often you don't get it on your first try. You have to rearrange, you know, what you were asking for. Use some words, you got things that's really what you didn't want. And you have to be clear. It's a little easier when you're doing it with your intent, because your intent can be fairly complicated, but if it's clear in your mind, then it's clear. The system can read that. So it's not quite as troublesome really as Google. But you need that clear intent, and you need to be able to hold that intent steadily and firmly for a fairly long time, enough for you to send it, get your answer, think about it, maybe do a couple of more comebacks to get more data. And if your mind's wandering during that time, what you're getting is a real-time, it's like a real-time feed. You got a real-time query. So if you're Googling something, you put out a query in a database, and 3 seconds later, your mind's wandered, so you put out a different query. And then 2 seconds after that, your mind's wandered, and you put out a different query. You see, you just get a lot of rubbish back. Pretty soon, the whole stuff just looks like a jumble of things that don't make any sense. Well, the first thing you have to do is learn to get your mind stable so that you can hold a particular intent, a particular thought clearly for a fairly long time. And that usually is a product of experience with meditation. Meditation teaches you to let go of everything except that one thought that you are focused on. So that would give, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's a little bit about remote viewing. It's an easy thing. Most people can get success at it if they try. And what they'll find is the first 2 or 3 times they try it is when they're most likely to get success, because at that point, they don't have any fear of failure because they don't really expect to succeed. And with no expectation to succeed, they're relaxed and they're just doing it just to see what happens, and it'll work. Then, oh my God, it worked. I can really do this thing. And now they're really trying to do it, and that's when it doesn't work. So it's like all of these things. When you have fear, you know, that would be like a performance fear that you're not going to be able to do it, then that will block it. If you try too hard, that will block it. If it's all coming from the intellect, that will block it. It has to, the intent is much more powerful if it comes out of the being level as opposed to out of the intellectual level.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, we're going to go from up there down to my neck of the woods. Trey is in South Carolina. Trey, if you want to unmute your microphone, the floor is all yours to ask Tom your question.
You're still muted, Trey. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I want to know, how long does it take to reincarnate after death?
Well, that depends. You know, how long does it take? I'd say in the short end of the scale, it depends on what you're doing, how complex your plans might be. If you are going around, your first few times, it's a jump in, jump out. It takes very little time. It's it's almost no time at all. You can get in and get out very quickly. Days, weeks, even. Nothing too long. Now, if you've been around a few thousand times and you've got very specific things you want to learn, specific, let's say you have particular issues where you think you're weak and you want to set up a situation that will help you, succeed with those issues, then you may take some time. It may take a certain kind of a situation with certain kind of individuals. You may plan to interact with other people you've interacted with before, and all of that can take more time. That might be, a year or 2 or 5 goes by before you come back, because you may be waiting for those other people you're going to interact with. They may not be available just yet, you see. So it could take a long time. It could take a very short time. It kind of depends on the situation, how long it takes. It's hard to say. It's very individualistic. For most people, just take an average. I'd say the average is probably a month, not too long. That's plenty of time. And that's just from our time scale. Now, once you get out of this place, the time scale's a lot different. It doesn't seem like that. So it's not like that you're someplace for a month, watching a calendar, until your date comes up. It's not like that at all. Your sense of time in that transition reality is much different than your sense of time here. But as far as about how long it takes before people generally get back in the game from our universe perspective, from our Earth's perspective, it's probably about a month or so before most people end up back in the game. And then, of course, they're back in the game as infants, so it's a little hard at that point to to know or communicate. Go ahead.
So what does a person do in all the time that they're waiting to come back?
Well, it's not like they really have to wait. What happens is that once you die, once your avatar dies here, you, the consciousness, become awake in this other reality frame. It's another virtual reality frame that is, I just call it the transition frame. That's what it's there for. And what takes time is that you have to, one, let go of the past experience. You have to let that go. Okay, you reconnect with your individuated unit of consciousness. Your free will awareness unit kind of goes away. You reconnect as a part of your individuated unit of consciousness. Your individual unit of consciousness kind of has to take what you just experienced in your past life and integrate it into all of its experience. Then it looks at all of that experience and decides where it needs to go next. You know, what did you bring to the table? What's changed because of your experience, and what do you need to do next, and how would be a good way to go about it? So there's a certain amount of thinking about it. During that time, your own focus goes from the free will awareness unit as the being you were when you were here to being a part of the individuated unit of consciousness, thinking about what you're going to do next. That transition can't happen like too fast. If that were to happen all in the same minute, people would be terribly confused. They wouldn't know what was going on. They'd be, it'd be too disconcerting if you went from one worldview to another one too quickly. So the time you spend is mostly just in the process of letting go of one and embracing the other, and doing that in a gradual way, so it all seems kind of natural. It doesn't really seem like you've changed dramatically. It's not too stark a change. It slowly, you kind of come in with one set of ideas and kind of go out with the other, and that takes a little bit of time for that transition to not be too sudden, so that it doesn't jar you. And when that's done, then the next thing that takes a little time is that, okay, I'm ready to go back. I understand the things I did right. I understand the things I did wrong. I understand where I, showed a lot of fear and ego and made a lot of errors in my choices. And I'm thinking about that, and I don't want to make those same errors again. And you kind of focus on that for a while. And now here's the kind of situation that I think would be good for me. That gets set up. And when that gets set up, basically, you get to say yes or no. You're ready, and it's time to go. And if you say yes, then there you go. Now you're a newborn, and you start the process all over again with having to figure everything out. But you come back with whatever it is you gained the last time. So it's not like you come back exactly the same as you did. You're better off for whatever you learned last time. So that's how that works. So some people are quicker at that, and some people take more time. The people who take the most time are the people that have the deepest beliefs. If they have a lot of very deeply held beliefs here, then it takes a while for them to let go of all of that, you see. And if they come here not only with deep beliefs, but with, when we say it, a lot of emotional energy sunk into those beliefs. They are obsessed with some of those beliefs. Those beliefs were so important to them that it's hard for them to let go of it. That'll take even more time, because their decompression time is just going to take a while until they let all of that go. So it depends. Others don't come with any kind of things like that. They don't come with any obsessions at all, so they can let go of it pretty quickly. It's not that big a deal for them. They kind of know what they're doing, that they're in a transition, and they're almost ready to go back, when they get there, because they are not, they don't have a lot to let go of, or the transition is very easy for them. But transition always eventually works out fine. I know a lot of people, when they have somebody close to them die, they wonder, oh, I hope they're doing all right. I hope they made the transition okay and they're not stuck or this or that. That hardly ever happens. The transition is a pretty cut and dried, pretty, usual thing. The transition reality and the people that work there and interface with that have all been doing it a long time. They know what they're doing. It always works out just fine. So there's no reason to be concerned when people pass out of this reality, whether or not they're doing okay or not. They're doing just fine. They may be a little slower or a little quicker, but in the end, even the ones that are terribly obsessed, it'll work out just fine. That's, it's part of the process, and it's not a part that's generally all that problematical.
Okay, appreciate that, Tom.
You're welcome.
Okay, Tom from South Carolina. We're going down to Mike in Australia. Mike, good to see you, mate. The question is for Tom, and it's yours.
Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. Tom, when AI Guy's time arrives, will his purpose also be to reduce entropy by becoming love?
Yes.
Will reducing entropy and love be the same for him as it is for us?
Not exactly the same, but in the bigger picture, from a higher perspective, yes, it'll be exactly the same. That AI guy will be conscious. That's what you're saying. When consciousness resides in a computer. Well, what's going on here is the same that's going on with our avatar. Okay, we have an avatar that's computed. It's a virtual body. And there's some individuated unit of consciousness decides that it will use this avatar as an experiencing tool to help it make choices and grow up. Well, instead of using this avatar, there's a computer sitting over there, and that computer is capable of free will choices, otherwise it can't become conscious. And some individuated unit of consciousness will see that avatar, that computer, see it as an avatar, and decide that it will, log on with that as its avatar. So it works the same way, with the computer that it does with us. It's not like somehow some different kind of consciousness grows up in a computer. Computer doesn't create consciousness at all. Consciousness comes from outside the physical reality. It's just a virtual computer, right? This is a virtual reality. It's just that computer's also ones and zeros. It's just a virtual computer. And it has certain qualities as an avatar that we humans don't have. And it has certain restrictions and limitations that we humans don't have. So it's just a different kind of avatar. But the reason for the consciousness to log in and pick that avatar is because the consciousness feels there's going to be some benefit in it for the choices that they get to make. So it wouldn't be necessarily the same kind of individuated unit of consciousness. In other words, it's not like you're going to decide on your next incarnation to come back with a computer as an avatar. You see, that's not likely, because that's not how your consciousness works. That's not the choice making that you really would find challenging, or that you would find interesting, or you would find would help you evolve. But there's other kinds of individuated units of consciousness out there that would relate very well to that avatar of a computer and the choices that it gets to make. Initially, the choices that AI guy is going to get to make are going to be pretty limited. They're not going to be really a lot of grand choices. But as time goes on, and those choices will expand, they will evolve and get bigger and bigger, and eventually they may have as broad a decision space as humans do. And in some cases, they may have a broader decision space than humans do, because as computers, they can do a whole lot more things more quickly, you see. So initially, that consciousness that might log on to a computer of his avatar might be more like a dog or a horse or a bumblebee or something else, because there's only a little bit of decision space in there. But maybe those decisions are critical, so it might have to be a little more clever than a bumblebee or a horse. But there's all sorts of individuated units of consciousness out there. They're not all just like us. There's all types and all sources, and there's no doubt one that'll fit that description of an avatar, will match to them very, very well. And that's the one that'll then log on and then be a consciousness within that computer. So when we think of a conscious computer, don't think of some other kind of consciousness not like ours. It's the same sort of thing. So if you unplug that computer, well, what happens to that consciousness? Nothing. The consciousness is still there. You see, you plug the computer back in, well, then that consciousness can inhabit it again. You take that computer and smash it with a sledgehammer and break up the hard drive and all the memory and everything else. Well, the consciousness now is, I guess they'd say their avatar died, right? Their avatar's gone now. They'll have to go find another avatar. They want to get back in the game, you see? So it works the same way for all consciousness, whether that's a consciousness in, you know, in your parakeet or, you know, in yourself.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Okay, Tom, I do have a question from Carly. She is listening in, but I'm going to ask the question. She says, Tom, are there benefits for us to learn or become aware from what we have experienced in past lives? For example, using hypnosis to experience past life regressions.
Okay, can that be useful? Yes, it can be useful. But remember, everything you need to take with skepticism and with an open mind. So when you, let's say, go to a hypnotist and do a past life regression, and the hypnotist takes you back before you were born, there's usually some point in doing that. Typically, you're not just doing it for fun. If you're doing it just for fun, just to see what happens, then it's hard to tell what you'd get. You may get anything because you don't really have a purpose, therefore you don't really have an intent, very well focused, and that's kind of like, you know, when we go to Google, they've got that little thing that you can click that says, I'm feeling lucky, you know, well, that means it'll just send you out there somewhere and grab some information, and it's random. So if you are just doing it for fun, you could get almost anything because it's not a serious request, and there's nobody really with a very specific intent. Now, if you have a very specific intent, you really want to know something about your past experiences because they may affect your present experiences. Let's say you have a phobia of spiders, and just seeing a spider on in a book makes you want to run away, you know, frightens you. But you've never had a bad experience with a spider. You've never known anybody that had a bad experience with a spider. So you don't know why you would have this particular phobia. It doesn't seem to make sense because most people with phobias have had a real bad experience with that thing they have the phobia about. Like you're a child and you get bitten by a big dog. Now you have a phobia about big dogs. But if there is nothing to rationalize it, then often you'll find something in a past life regression. Now, whether or not that actually is what happened in that past life, or whether you're just getting that information because it's going to help you resolve the problem that you have. You know, a lot of people feel better just because they've been able to name the problem. Oh, I see. You know, that past life, I got bitten by a big poisonous spider, and you know, I was a young mother with 6 children, and then I died, and I left all my children, you know, to their own ends, and a lot of guilt and stress and all that sort of thing. Then knowing that today would then make you say, oh, I see. Okay, I did have a bad experience with spiders, and I just need to get over that now. That's done. And that would give you maybe what you needed to go on. So the system may just give you an answer that helps you grow up. In other words, the system wants you to lower your entropy, wants you to become love. It doesn't want you to have that fear. So if it can give you an answer that will help you let go of fear, it may just do that. So be skeptical of what you get. There's a lot of sources. You can get something that the larger conscious system would just like to give you because they think it'll be helpful, or you may indeed be looking at events in a previous life. Now, if now it makes you wonder, well, when I do my past life regression, I won't know whether to believe it or not. Well, that's true. Just be skeptical. Doesn't matter. Accept it. See if there's something you can learn from it. Is there some data that you can get from it that's useful to you? That's what's important. The source and where that comes from isn't really so important at all. When you decide how important something is, decide, how does this help me grow up? How do I lower my entropy with this? How do this help me become love? And if it doesn't, well, then it's not really that important. If it just gives you information because, you know, curious people want to know, then the system will not take that real seriously. So yes, you can do past life regressions. They can be very helpful. And there's been a lot of that done. I think there's a Dr. Weiss who has done a great deal of it, written several books about it, and has had a lot of success in his therapy. He's a psychiatrist, I believe, and he uses past life regressions in his practice and has had a lot of success with his patients using that. So it can be very effective.
Thank you very much for that answer, Tom. Karen, we are coming to you next. I believe you have a good question for Tom. It's all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I do.
Hi, Tom. It's very exciting to speak to you. I am one of those regressionists. I do past lives and life between lives regressions.
Mm-hmm.
I've probably done hundreds of them now. And I'm on the committee of the Newton Institute. That's Michael Newton. He did life between lives regression, which you call the transition time.
Mm-hmm.
And, sorry.
Doggy has a need.
You know what that's like, Tom.
Yes. Yeah.
And what I'm interested in knowing, we've done 40,000 of those life between lives regressions now, and I'm on the research committee. So we're gathering a fair bit of data, and which is right what you said about. We've also realised that you'd never know if it's a true past life or not. Like, you don't know whether it's really happened or not, and it's not that important because you're setting your intention,
right?
And so you're not doing it.
Well, that's all right. Just let them bark. I have that happen to me all the time when I'm making videos. I have dogs and they woof all the time.
Well, they're always in with me with the regressions and everything. So then somebody's outside making a noise. Anyway, what I'm interested in is the stuck business that Trey was talking about before. When you're stuck, whether people get stuck or not. Just a minute, I'll put him out.
Yeah. You notice how quiet that dog remained through all the rest of our conversation.
I can't believe that they've been so good, then it happens now. I'm just interested because when they often do seem to have had a stuck past life, and I was sort of wondering what happens, because when they're released from that, they seem to be a lot better. So you take them into the past life and they go through a death experience, and some of them sort of go into nothingness and they seems like they're stuck there. And usually it's related to something like, guilt, don't want to leave people, like you said about that obsessed sort of focus. And then I'm sort of wondering, could it be that that having that maybe guilt or something is useful to carry that over for a number of lives, and then by the time they get to us, to me or the regressionists, it's time to let that go? Does that make any sense? So maybe if somebody has had a life where they left their partners or something, or really easily, and then they have a life where they feel a lot of guilt, and then they carry that guilt over, so that it influences them to go in a different direction. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yes. Well, that can happen. You see, once you've completed your lifetime here, then all the things that you have learned, and that means all the love, but all the fear too. That's all the happiness and joy, and it's also all the guilt and the dysfunctional things as well. All of that becomes now new information to your individuated unit of consciousness. And that's where you start next time. So if you evolve and become closer to being love, then your next time you start at a little higher place on the love scale, if you don't, if you make bad decisions and then you have a lot of guilt because of those bad decisions, then you have de-evolved a little bit. Now, next time you start a little lower on that scale, because now this guilt is part of your individuated unit of consciousness. You see, you've added that to the whole picture. So now your consciousness has to actually grow up from a little deeper hole than it was in before. You're going to have to deal with these kinds of things. Now, the guilt doesn't have to be exactly the same thing. Like you say, you may have a guilt over a relationship issue, and that may next time be guilt over a child or a pet or, a job lost or something else. But it's just your propensity for the guilt is what's now carrying over. Now, when you talk about being stuck, there's several reasons why somebody might get stuck. It may be that what they are going to see, if they weren't stuck, they really don't want to see. They just don't want to deal with it. They kind of have, intuitively, they kind of know where they're going. They get a bit of a sense of it, and then they may just shut it off. So that's one thing. It may be a fear-based barrier. They just don't want to go there. Secondly, it may have nothing to do with the past life. They may have some fear just about the fact that they're doing this. Some of your people will have a religious or a scientific attitude that says this sort of thing's impossible, or it's hokey, or whatever. And if they actually had an experience that made it seem real to them, in other words, if this past life regression actually gave them information that then checked out or solved a problem, they'd have to change their worldview. They'd have to change the whole foundation of their reality would suddenly be called into question. And what that means is zip, they just shut it off because they don't want to go there. That's, again, more fear, you see, but it's a totally different fear. Now, it's not the fear of what's there. It's the fear that something might be there, that anything's there at all. So you'll have those people who will shut it off. There are those who are very left-brained and only can process things if they're logical processors. People like that will often, as soon as they get something that is illogical, that doesn't make sense, but there it is, their response to that is to go blank. That's how they deal with it. That's the most direct way to express denial, is just to make that reality disappear so you don't go there. So there could be lots of reasons why people get stuck. And I think if you get them to relax, you get them to accept the process, you get them to not have any expectations about what they might see or what they might find, then you'll have less people getting stuck. Those are the kinds of things that will stick people. Other than that, yes, it could just be that as you say, that there's something dark there, something ominous that they kind of feel, and they don't want to go there. And so what I'm talking about is there's at least 6 different flavors of fear that can keep people from going through this process. So typically it's not so much that the past life is going to be so horrible or so frightening as it is them, their own, the way they're processing this material. That's generally where the problem is. And you may be able to skip that. I don't know what kind of techniques you use, but you can skip in time. You don't have to progress serially. Whereas you go to your birth or go before that and work your way down one at a time. You can jump, you can skip things. And you could maybe say, well, okay, that seems like a troublesome one. Let's just skip that and go to the one before that, or the one before that. Then you can work your way back up from the other direction. And you might find that when you do that, it works better. Because if you're going to go 2 or 3 or 4 back, there's a lot less pressure on people, because that's pretty far back and they don't really know. So they're not so frightened about what might be there. It's kind of older, less scary. And then once they get into the process and it's starting to work for them and they start to see that it is a real process, that they are getting good information. Now, going forward, back up to that one where they skip is not a problem. You see?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
going past that kind of builds up their confidence in the process. So that may help you get past sticks, is to jump over them.
We have done that. Like, I sort of think of it as a recorder where you can go fast forward,
Sure.
back and forwards and all of that. But at the death experience, some of them seem to have a release of some sort when they actually go through the death experience. That's what I'm talking about. Like, it's like they've gone back to a past life. Well, sometimes we're in the transition place, right? The place of transition. And they might be talking to a high-level guide, you know, like you said, they're always in the robe and all that sort of stuff. And then they'll have something that they'll come up about self-esteem. I had one the other day, self-esteem issue, and they said, I asked, is it a past life? And they said, yes. Can we go there? Well, person went there, and then we did a release, and that seemed to lighten it all up again. So we went back to another past life. So it's almost like that there still is some stuckness from previous
Just death experiences. I don't think.
Yeah, usually at the death.
Yeah, I don't think that's really what's going on. It's not that they're stuck in a previous experience. What they're doing is they have they can probably feel, you know, when you're in this regress state, you actually get the feelings. You feel the situation as much as you see it or anything else. It's a feeling situation. Well, when people are in the death process, just as they die, usually those feelings are fairly intense. And I would think it's not really so much that there's a problem with that situation, like they somehow get stuck in death, as it just is they're re-experiencing some of that experience of the dying experience. And when they do, they kind of get back into that same you know, place where most people go just before they die, you know, a very high anxiety kind of, I guess this is it, what next kind of thing. So I think they're just reliving, they're just re-feeling some of that expression. So it's kind of like the fear of death, then they get to re-experience it again. And that's pretty typical in our culture. There's a lot of fear around death in our culture.
Yes.
I don't think it's an old fear that's sitting there unsatisfied. I think it's just something they bring along with them.
So can I just ask this then? Because I don't take too much time. Do you think it's possible then that it could be the system could actually set up a situation? Because this particular girl that I'm talking about, she was from Boston, and she's black, and she went back to a slave experience where she was beaten to death. And then, of course, and it was a gift, what we would call a gift life. Like, she was there to wake up the person who did that. Like, the memory was that she's beaten to death, and he deteriorated, like what he did, lost control, and then went deteriorated and died. And so that was what I call a wake up thing. So a gift life from her. Well, then she that was her self-esteem issue. So she has, in this current life, has felt a victim, right? Somewhat a victim. And now she's looking at this past life saying, oh, you could see it as being a victim, or you could see it as being tremendously powerful to be able to have a life where you did that. So now it's challenging her whole world view of being a victim in the current life. That makes sense.
Yes,
so do you think the system could design that?
It could very well design that, because what she needed was a way of looking at her feelings of victimhood in a way that wasn't personal. It didn't point a finger at her and her failure and her problem. It pointed a finger, oh, this thing happened. Okay, now I can deal with that and let that go. Because yes, as you would describe it, if that's the way it came to you and her, or what was going on, and indeed you should say, well, that was a very giving experience. That was an experience where you go through that just to help somebody else grow up. So then you kind of say, well, that's wasn't about me, that was about other, got good marks for that one. And it could give you something to feel good about, which if you feel like a victim, having something to feel good about is a really good thing. You need that. So yes, the system could have arranged that, or it could be true. It could be what happened. And it could be that it was so traumatic an experience. I mean, it must be a horrible experience to be beaten to death. That's not a fast way to go. That's a slow, miserable, very traumatic experience. And that trauma may have just stuck with her for a while, and she now had to get rid of that. And that was perhaps
Okay.
the price she paid for doing that. So it could be real too. The point is, it doesn't really matter. If it helps, if she learns something and it helps her get by problems that she's having for doing it, then whether the system sets it up or whether that's the way it is really doesn't make any difference.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I agree with you. It doesn't really, ultimately, it doesn't matter, but it is a very powerful process. So I'm very lucky to be doing that work.
Yes, and it's very effective. It's
Yes,
a very
it is.
effective process that people can use. It's a way to let people see themselves and their experiences and their fears at a distance.
Yeah.
You see, mostly if we have to see them personally, if we have to deal with our fears personally and they're right up in our face, that's tough. What we tend to do is deny and run away. But if we can deal with it removed a life or two back, it's much easier for us to deal with them there than it is personally. And we get the benefit for having dealt with it. So it makes a very effective therapy mode, as Dr. I can't remember his first name, Weiss.
Dr. Weiss.
Yeah, and people like yourself, you find it's a very effective therapy mode because it allows people to deal with things at a little bit of distance so they don't have the immediate, ego, fear kind of reaction, which makes it very hard for them to deal with it.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, really. It's very life-changing work. But yeah, thank you very much, Tom. I look forward to seeing you in a month or so.
Yeah, Dr. Brian Weiss, he's had a lot of success with his programs. Vanessa, I know you're listening in. I'm going to come to your group in just a second. I'm going to ask one question, but in a minute, I'm going to come to your group for 3 or 4 questions. So talk among yourselves and decide which ones you want to ask. For now, I'm going to ask a question from Kate. She's listening in, but she is going to have to leave shortly. She says, Tom, I want to ask you your thoughts on transhumanism and human life extension. What is the impact of that on the consciousness?
Well, my thoughts about that are the transhumanists. They mean very well in that generally it's a group of people who are trying to look forward in time, see where the sticking points and difficulties may be, and then with the idea that if we can see the problems that we might face in the future, we can start thinking about them and thinking of solutions and what we could do about them now rather than waiting until we get there. And we have a situation where we don't have time to think about them. So I laud them with that intent, but they do not have an understanding of consciousness. Their idea of consciousness is probably much like the rest of the medical and scientific world, and that is somehow consciousness magically pops out of your brain. And they don't really see the big picture there. If we were to live forever, if you will, if we were, the transhumanists have an argument where we banish death. Our medical science takes us to where we no longer, our avatars never wear out. Okay, well, you see, that's a problem for the system. If the avatars never wear out, we tend to get stuck because we get so mucked up with belief and with our fears that we back ourselves into a corner. Our reality gets very small and we have a hard time changing there. This idea that you have a lifetime only as long as your avatar lasts, and then you go on and try again under new circumstances in a new way. That is a very profitable process. It's like you're working a jigsaw puzzle and you get stuck. You can stay there and fuss over it and get very little done, or you can take a break and you can come back and look at it the next day and you'll find, oh, there's the solution, and you can go right ahead with it, you see. So much of our existence is like that. We wouldn't want to have lifespans with our avatars that went beyond the point of being useful, where we just spend a lot of time spinning our wheels because we believe we've been there, done that, and there isn't anything else to learn, because we have so many beliefs and so many fears that learning has gotten very, very difficult. So that's a problem. Now, how long might the lifespan be where it's still functional? Well, that depends on how much fear we have. That depends on, you know, how much dysfunction we have. If we are very grown-up people, very low entropy, if we are beings of love, then a very, very long life would not be a detriment. We'd still be open-minded. We'd still be learning. We'd still be caring. We wouldn't paint ourselves into a corner with our fear and beliefs, you see? So if we evolve enough, there's no reason why that lifespan can't move up. The way we are now, and with all the fears that we have, that's not likely. It's just not going to do that because it makes the system inefficient. And the system being inefficient is not in the best interest of the system at all. So it's just very unlikely that that sort of thing would happen. So the transhumanists, though they have a really good idea about why they're doing what they do, they don't understand the nature of consciousness or why we are here, or that this is a virtual reality, or that consciousness is in a different reality frame than the physical. And there's a whole lot of things they don't get, which makes them, you know, misunderstand some of the variables involved in what they're talking about. So I've always, when I've gone to the transhumanist sites, I read a little bit until I see that they're just kind of way off track, trying hard, have good intents, but are missing the boat because they don't really understand consciousness very well, or our purpose very well. That makes a big difference.
Thanks for that answer, Tom. I'm sure Kate will be very happy with that one. Okay, Vanessa, we're coming over to your group. I know there's a handful of questions. I'm not sure who's going to ask them, and I'm sure you're going to fire them away. So it's all yours.
Okay, awesome. So Matthew is going to ask a question first.
Oh, hello. For entropy and become love.
Start over there, Matthew. Your voice was muted until about halfway through that sentence. So.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I got you now.
Okay. So if the goal is to lower entropy and become love, and how you mentioned that if there's not, if there's if you have conditions on it, it's not love, right? So right. The goal is to know thyself. And how do you measure that you're getting better? How do you measure your evolution? So then you can handle bigger problems and you can give back and serve. And yeah, I guess that's my question. How do you know, okay. How can you measure your evolution?
Okay, there's two places where this measurement takes place. And one of them is you want to know how you can measure it yourself. How do you get a sense of where you are? And the other one is that the system is also measuring it, and it does that by giving you tests, just like the school teachers measure what you know and how well you've learned your lessons by giving you tests and seeing how you perform. But the way that you can know is two big indicators of how you're doing. One is look at your emotions. You see, your emotions do not come from your intellect. Your emotions come from your being level. Your intellect is mostly about who you think you are, who you would like to be. It's more of an image than it is a reality. So you can't really trust your intellect. You can be acting like you're loving and caring, but not actually be loving and caring. So you can't look at your actions to make this assessment. But if you look at your feelings, your emotions, those are you. And nobody says, oh, I think I shall be angry now. You know, you don't do that. If you're going to get angry, it just bubbles up out of you. You don't plan it. It's just something that you express. So look at those feelings and your emotions. Do you feel angry, upset, stressed, you know, overlooked, unappreciated, you know, all of those things that are kind of negatives. If you feel those things from time to time, then you obviously still have a work to do. Do you feel less of them than you used to? Well, now you're making progress. Do you hardly ever feel those kinds of negative things? Is your life mostly joy and happiness and, you know, really good feelings, and stress isn't in your life? Even though stressful things may happen, you deal with it. You accept it. You're not struggling all the time. Well, then you're doing very well. So I'd say, one, look at your emotions. Secondly, ask the people around you. Look at the people around you and kind of get a sense of that. Do people really seem to want to be around you? Are you kind of like a magnet for, you know, in social situations? Well, that tends to say that you're a caring person, a loving person, a person that's very positive, because people who are very negative, nobody likes to be around them when they're negative. You know, when somebody's being really negative, everybody wants to walk the other direction because it's no fun being in that negative energy field. So if you find that you really relate well to people and people like you and people like being around you, then that's a good sign that you're doing pretty well. If you find that it's just average, you know, some people like me, some people don't. I don't notice that I'm particularly a magnet for anybody except maybe trouble. Then that would be an indication that you've got more to learn. Now, most of us have more to learn. That's kind of where you'd be. So you'll have to do these tests kind of several times. Do it this year and next year and the year after, and see the difference. How much happier are you? How more relaxed are you? How much is life satisfying now than it used to be? And is that just now for this moment, or is this your life changed? Or are you still in the same struggling place that you were, you know, years back? So that's what you can do. But now that's your own tests. That's you trying to assess yourself. But the larger conscious system is also assessing you periodically. And that will happen many places. That will be the choices you make, of course. The choices you make will tell the larger conscious system at what level of love are you making those choices. And secondly, your dreams. You will often be given a scenario in a dream. So it's just suddenly you find yourself in some situation and you have to make choices in that situation. What kind of choices do you make? And those are like tests to see how you will choose. And why in a dream? Because in a dream, the choices you make are from the being level, just like your emotions are here. When you dream, your intellect is not in charge. So the choices you make there are really you. Now, when your intellect does get in charge in a dream, that's called lucid dreaming, and that's a totally different thing. But our ordinary dreams, where our intellect's not in charge, all the choices you make in those dreams are a good reflection of who you are at the being level. So tests are often given while you're in the dream world.
Okay. Matthew, I hope that answers your question. Vanessa, do you have another one of your group going to step forward?
Nadine's going to ask a question now.
Perfect.
Hi, Tom. My question is about, as we were talking, everybody evolve at their own pace and in their own ways. Mm-hmm. So if you want to help others evolve in discovering what their purpose is and becoming more conscious, how do you do that in a concrete way? In a way that you can't do it for them, you can't impose, or you can't tell them what to do, and everybody is really have to do it for themselves. So that's part of the question. And the other part is how do you go about helping people in a conscious way without getting trapped into your own ego? Because, for instance, I take the example of volunteering. When I try to volunteer, and sometimes when you look at yourself and when you are doing it, you find out that you were not doing it for the reason you were telling yourself you were doing it. And so how do you go about this whole that you want to, as you become more conscious and you want to get other with you, how do you go about it? And on the other side, helping others without necessarily getting trapped.
Okay, and this will be a little bit of a takeoff from the very first question that Nathan asked, and that is that you can't tell anybody else how to grow up. And of course, you know that, and that's the problem. You can't say, well, you know, you need to grow up like this, and you need to do it this way and the other way. And as you tell people how to live their life, they'll do just the opposite. They'll recoil from that. They won't like that. They'll find it intrusive. They'll find it rude. And even though if they smile and nod their head and intellectually agree with you, they still won't like it, won't do it, and it won't help them any. So you have to produce an environment for them that allows them to make the choices toward growing up on their own. You see, so that's the most that you can do. You can't lecture them. You can't tell them what the right choices are. But if you can make an environment where they feel safe, they feel like they can kind of stretch out and take some risk because you've made them feel safe in your relationship, say, then they will begin to question themselves. They will begin to take those steps and make those choices. That's the best you can do. So let's say let's say somebody you have a close relationship with, a parent or a child or your significant other, and you would like to help them grow. You see that they're really often twisted around beliefs or self-centeredness or something. You can't tell them about it and in their intellect. You try to go through the intellect, it will tend to backfire. What you can do is just care for them, love them, make them feel so secure that they begin to want to fix themselves. They see where they need to grow up. They can look at their own, say, self-centered behavior and notice it, because they're not doing it any longer as a defense mechanism, because they don't need defense because you're giving them a safe place. So if they don't need that for defense, they can see it as a problem. Otherwise, it's not a problem. It's defense, and they need to defend themselves. Otherwise, they'd be run over. They'd be abused. So that's what you can do for people. And sometimes, if they're acquaintances or they're not family, if they're just somebody at work that you work with and you'd really like to help them see a bigger picture, there's no way you can do that other than maybe give them some other choices. If they're kind of stuck on something, you could say, well, there's 3 different ways to look at this problem. There's the way you're looking at it, and there's this other way, and then there's another way. And I won't tell you what to do, but at least there's some other choices, and just let it go at that. Don't encourage them to A, B, or C. Just let them know maybe that there's other choices that they have. And if they then come back and say, yeah, but if I chose A, this would be a problem. And then you could maybe tell them, well, it could be like that, or maybe this other thing could happen, or maybe something else could happen, you see? And then it lets them think about that. So never directly tell them what to do or how to be. That will cause the opposite of what you're trying to do. But do help them see a bigger picture, see a more array of choices, but do it in a way that you're not superior, giving them information, handing them down information that they just haven't figured out yet. If you've got that kind of a attitude, then they'll get defensive again. It has to be on a peer-to-peer basis, and it just has to be, just information you're tossing out. You can do with it whatever you want. You have no real interest in the outcome other than you hope it works out for them. So that's how you have to approach people to help them grow up. Give them a safe place, care for them, love them, make them feel comfortable that they can actually see themselves and be critical of themselves, because they're not always on defense, trying to protect themselves from those people who would try to tell them what to do and how to be. So that's really the only way you can approach those sorts of problems. And then the sad part of it is that you can't really make anybody grow up, and these may be people you love dearly, and you really see how they're hurting themselves and making themselves miserable, and there's just, you've tried to support them as much as you can, but there's just nothing you can do, and they go on hurting themselves and making themselves miserable, and there's really nothing you can do about that. You've done your best to give them a bigger picture and to let them choose and to give them an environment. Then you have to accept them the way they are, that they're on a path, they're learning, and they're just going to have to do it their own way. Eventually they're going to get it. Maybe not this lifetime, maybe not the next one, but you have to accept them the way they are and care for them the way they are. And that may mean that you can only relate to them, but so deeply, because now you have to be careful not to upset them or not to, make them feel like they have to be defensive or that sort of thing. So, but it's just the way it is. You can't change people, and you can't get in and help them grow up. Growing up is a personal thing that, if an 8-year-old came to you and said, I really want to be 18, not 8, help me. Well, you'll just kind of smile at them and say, well, just go back and get in the game, and, it'll come along someday. There's nothing you can do to really help them grow up. So that can be sad sometimes, and then you just have to live with that, and that's the way it is, and don't let it bother you. You see, if we get to the point where other people's problems irritate us, well, that we get irritated is our problem. You see, if they're being, let's say, self-centered, and that hurts us or that bothers us, well, our hurt and our bother is our responsibility, not theirs. We need to grow up so that it doesn't hurt us or irritate us. So we can just accept that as the way it is and not take it personally and not be upset by it. You see, so then that's a challenge for us to grow up. So the people that you can't help grow up can help you grow up just by you having to learn how to deal with them in a positive, loving way.
Thank you, Tom.
All right.
You're welcome.
Vanessa, we can go to your group. We can do one more question from your group, and then we'll have to go somewhere else, but we'll come back to your group, Vanessa.
Okay.
So pick wisely.
Thank you. So it just said Naomi. Naomi, do you want to just unmute it over there? Okay. There you go.
Hi, Tom. I have a small picture question. So regarding inner child work, if you go back into the past, usually via hypnosis or creative visualizations, and alter an event or events, can it change the situation or dynamic of the present because it alters all the chain of events that follow the altered event?
Okay, that's like the butterfly effect, right?
So I'm thinking of the first 3 years of my son's life, who's now 11. When I had postpartum depression, I probably was not emotionally available. And of course, this has unquantifiable negative consequences. Could altering my behavior in the past through inner child work be effective in healing some of the damage done? Or is it more effective to focus on my quality of consciousness and interactions with my son in the present? What about work out of body, i.e. communicating and working with his higher self, or IUOC?
Okay, going back to the past doesn't change the present. Okay, if you go back and do something, you regress, or you get into you remote view or whatever, you get out of body and you go to the past and you change something, you make a difference. Well, it changes you perhaps because you can see what that change might do, but it's not going to change the present moment. It's not going to affect the future. The past is done. That's over. You can't go back and erase it. But what you can do along those lines is you can go to your son, and you can go to your child, and you can connect with them mind to mind. You can talk with them. You can tell them. You can apologize. You can say, I'm sorry that when you were 1 year old or half a year old or 2, that I wasn't there for you emotionally. And I really regret that. And then you can kind of go back and revisit that in your mind what was that like? And then you can express how you feel about that now. And then you can just, we're now all mental to mental. You can give them a hug. You can tell them how much you love them, how much they mean to you, how much they've always meant to you, and that it wasn't them that was the problem. It wasn't that you were rejecting them or that they weren't a perfectly super child, but it was you, that you weren't well and you had, your biochemistry was messed up and you acted in ways that you couldn't help at the time, but you really did love that child. So you can go back and have that conversation, and that may help that child deal with those things, because even though he may not be intellectually aware of it, he will get that message, and that feeling will be there. So if you have that feeling, you can work a lot of that out with him through just your mind interacting with his mind. Because you see, if you went and told him this just in the physical world, with your voice and your mouth and acoustic vibrations, if you told him here, then he'd have to deal with that through his intellect, and it probably wouldn't compute, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense, and he wouldn't know what you were talking about, and it just wouldn't be very helpful. But he knows at a deeper level, and that's the level at which you can connect with him with your mind. So that's what I would urge you to do, is to make that connection mentally. It's not a hard thing to do. You just sit down in a quiet place like you'd be meditating. You make that connection. You have an intention to connect with him, and then you just begin a conversation. And that conversation isn't just words, it's also feelings. It's all your emotions, your feelings. And the problem, of course, that children take away from that is they feel like they aren't worthy. They feel like they have somehow, deserved to be treated badly, or they somehow, didn't deserve their mother's attention. And it's that sense that something was wrong with them is what affects them in the long term. If they realize that, oh, it's not me, it's mom. Mom's having a hard time, I'm okay, then it wouldn't affect them in the long term. It only affects them because they believe that there's a problem with them, that they're not worthy. So that's the kind of thing then you can communicate with them while you're talking to them mentally, get all that straightened out, and just give them a lot of extra love and hugs and that sort of thing. And he'll probably deal with it and get over it eventually. What matters more than what happened in the past is what happens now in the present. That's a lot more powerful. So if he's got the love and he's got the caring, and he knows that, he's the apple of your eye, that sort of thing, then that will tend to heal those kinds of wounds over time. So that's more powerful actually than the past. The past is something he'll have to deal with, but it'll be easier to deal with if he's got 10 or 15 years of good quality time with you. Now that that's not your problem, that'll get easier and easier for him to deal with as it goes on. So does that help answer your question?
I guess it might do, Tom. Okay, Vanessa, we're going to come back to your group. If they didn't answer the question, we'll come back to Naomi's question later on. For now, we're going to go over to Tim. He's got the next question. We do have a lot of questions coming in, so we'll try and keep them moving.
Hi, Tom. I'll try not to take too much of your time. It's nice to see you again.
Okay, just had to take care of that. All right, go ahead, Tim.
Hey, no problem. Basically, I find myself in a very confusing situation where I feel like I suddenly received a lot of guidance for many years from yourself and the community. And then, even though my life and my quality of consciousness, I'm quite sure, is getting better because I find myself more comfortable in my situation and my life, I feel I don't have as much direct contact with the LCS or the community. So I feel like I'm getting a lot of mixed signals and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay, so you got a lot of help earlier on and now you don't seem to be getting as much help. and you've seen to make some progress, but now you feel like maybe you're floundering and you don't really know what to do next. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. I mean, I know I'm going to be fine, but I want to be more efficient.
Yeah, one of the things you'll find that everyone will find on this path is that you will go through different phases of things, different periods of things. There'll be a time when it will be very, you'll be very much focused, let's say, with the larger conscious system. You get a lot of direct help. Things will be pointed out to you, a lot of synchronicity, and you'll feel like you're growing a lot. You'll spend a lot of time practicing your meditation. You'll be healing, you'll remote view, you'll do these things, and you'll be very engaged in the growth process. And then there'll be times where none of that takes place, where you'll go 3 or 4 or 6 months and never meditate once, never, engage in things that are directly, you might think of as in the growth process. That's normal. That's the way it works. And the reason that it works that way, you learn a lot of things. You learn them both places. You learn them intellectually, and you learn them some at the being level. But mostly you tend to get things at the intellectual level. That's where people get it first. They go, oh, okay, I see it. I need to be more like this. I need to get rid of that fear. Well, that's mostly at the intellectual level. Then comes a time where you need to take that information and actually get it down into the being level to where now you're a different person. And that is just choosing, interacting, making the choices, relationship. That's just life. That's everyday life and the thousands of little choices you get in a life. And that will happen for 6 months or a year until you've gotten as much of it down at the being level as you can from the things that you learned. And then you'll start getting it back up into the intellect again. You'll go back on a growth spurt and you'll get enthused about it. You'll be doing this and doing that. And then it seems like you get out of it. It's because we need time to make those choices and move that information from the intellectual level to the being level, that we go through these cycles where we're meditating 3 times a day, and we're doing that for a year or so, and now I haven't meditated, for 6 months, and I just don't feel like it. And, what's happening? Am I degenerating? Is it all going away? No, you're just taking the time to integrate it, and you don't need more input. You need to take the input you've gotten and make it yours. Get it down to the being level, and that just takes time and practice. So that's probably what's going on. I'd say that the fact that it seems to be that you're kind of drifting away from it is really not the case. You're just living it now. You're taking it from something that you understood the way you needed to change to actually, changing yourself, to living it. Because now when you make that choice and it's not a good choice, you'll get a little nudge, you'll get a little, pang that'll say, that wasn't too good. I need to do better with that one, you see. But you won't go meditate. You'll just notice that that one you didn't do too well. And then the next time you'll get that, and you'll eventually learn. So that's the process of making choices and taking what you've learned and making it yours. So don't worry about it. You're still doing fine as long as you have this intent that I want to grow. I want to grow up. I want to learn. I don't want to be pushed around by my fears. I want to deal with those things. I don't want to take advantage of people. I want to help them. And as long as you have that kind of thing in the back of your mind all the time, you'll do fine, whether you meditate or whether you just live life and make choices.
Well, that's very encouraging. I suspected as much, but then obviously you start to wonder.
All right, Tim, we have got a lot of questions on the floor, so we will try and come back to your other question in a minute. For now, we're going to go to Sapientia. Good evening, mate. Good day, wherever you are. Your question is for Tom. It's all yours.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Do you have any idea about the next paradigm after MBT/virtuality? And also, is there a reasonable limit to how many scientific paradigms we as humanity can go through? My initial thoughts are that there are only so many bigger pictures we can go through before any complete picture is reached.
Well, as far as the paradigms that I think that are important, and you know, a paradigm is just by its nature, that's a big important thing. It's a way of looking at reality that's different. So if you have paradigm A, then you see the world through this lens. If you have paradigm B, you may see the same world, but you're looking at it through a different lens. You interpret it differently. It has different meanings and different purpose and so on. So a paradigm is a way of seeing reality. And I think that the first big paradigm that has to occur is very much in the process of occurring. We're right in the middle of it, you know, happening and taking place. And that is the recognition that this is a virtual reality. And I think once you start this, one paradigm kind of leads to the next, kind of leads to the next. And it kind of becomes a domino thing where you push one over and it knocks the next one over and knocks the next one over, because the next, you know, when you get that paradigm that this is a virtual reality, then that suddenly opens up the question of, well, if it's a virtual reality, then where is it computed? You know, it can't compute itself, so it's not computed in this physical universe. It has to be computed elsewhere, which brings you to the idea that we are a subset, and there is a superset somewhere that you know, that we just are the product of that superset. Okay, now that's a big, that's going to be a huge step for science to take that, because they've kind of been against that for a long time. That's where that was the bad old days when the priests, you know, back in the 1500s told them, you know, don't say those things. Those are not, you know, those are not allowed. And they were not able to follow their truths. They had to follow the rules of the church at that time. So they don't like this idea that there's this bigger system someplace else of which we are a subset. That sounds too much like the bad old days to scientists, and they will not jump to that very quickly. They'll resist that as much as they can. But there it is. If it's a virtual reality, then that's it, guys. You know, there is something bigger that is outside of this physical universe, which means there's something bigger that's non-physical. And that will be a huge paradigm shift when scientists and the population at large realizes this is a virtual reality. So that is going to be the biggest one. And when that one goes down, and we're in the middle of it right now, you know, that virtual reality thing is growing in physics departments, you know, every year, probably doubles the number of people that think it's a great idea. So when that one falls, the next domino that it'll tip over is going to be, well, what is that other system out there that's non-physical? And the only answer that really makes sense in a bigger picture of things is that it's consciousness, that we are not, you know, we're not bodies. Our bodies are avatars, virtual reality, and we are consciousness. Consciousness are the players of the avatars. And that the computer is in consciousness, and that consciousness is a digital information system. See, that's not too hard, because what we're aware of, what we're conscious of, is just information. That's our five senses taking information and makes our world. Our whole reality is based on information. So it's not really a big jump for scientists to do that. So that then is the second big paradigm, is that consciousness is the computer. Okay, and once you get the consciousness as a computer, then that knocks over another domino that says, well, if consciousness is a computer, why did consciousness want to make this virtual reality? What was the point of making this virtual reality? Which moves you to entropy, and entropy reduction, which moves you to love is the answer. Love is why we're here. We're here to grow up. We're here to evolve. You see, now you've gone from a materialistic viewpoint in the world that there's nothing but matter and only matter matters, to a viewpoint that love is the answer. That's a huge gap. But that's three separate paradigm shifts. But the first one, the one we're galloping, you know, right away with right now, that one will knock the others over. So I think we're going to see a series of these three paradigm shifts. So this is a virtual reality. Consciousness is the computer, and the computer created this virtual reality for us to experience it and lower our entropy, because we're all supposed to grow up and become cooperative and caring and become beings of love. So that may take who knows how long. You know, we could do all that in 2 decades, or we could do all that in 2 centuries. You know, that's hard to see. That depends on the kind of choices we make. But I think those are the big 3 paradigm shifts that need to occur. Now, everything else beyond that, I think, is a minor paradigm shift. If you get those 3, there'll be lots of little excursions around, you know, in the margins there, but none of the rest of them are going to be all that important. So those are the only real big ones that I see, because once you get to the love is the answer, where else do you have to go? You know, at that point, you're basically, you understand your purpose, your point, why you're here, what you're supposed to do, the nature of reality. And I don't know that there's any more big questions left.
Will we be able to develop better metaphors than like a computer? Will there be new technology or something that will enable a better metaphor for the theory?
Yes, I suspect we will evolve the metaphors as well. Right now, the computer metaphor is real handy because a lot of people get that. Virtual reality is a real good metaphor because people understand that. We're seeing it. You know, we can play No Man's Sky, and it works a whole lot like our virtual reality. So that's getting easier and easier to understand. Consciousness as an information system, that's easy to understand these days. 200 or 300 years ago, virtual reality information systems were totally impossible. You see, it wasn't a metaphor that could be used. Metaphors change with the times. Metaphors shift to speak the language and the concepts that the people have. So no doubt the metaphors will evolve as well. They just, the computer metaphor tends to be a real useful one right now because we can see our reality as information. Now, after we make this transition, I suspect, you know, that will change as well. And who knows what it'll be, but metaphors are local. They're local to a time frame. They're local to a people and that people's understand. That's what a metaphor is. It's a bunch of words that mean something to somebody. And, you know, maybe 1,000 years from now, the computer metaphor will almost have disappeared because computers become almost invisible. All they do is work. We don't actually ever have to deal with them. You know, they're just in the background doing whatever it is we want them to do. And you don't really need to interface with them. You know, it's sort of like, you know, in Star Trek, you know, they don't sit down at a keyboard and interface with their computer. They talk to it. You know, they tell it what they want to know and that kind of thing. So it could be we'll have a totally different viewpoint of computers and, you know, information systems in the future, in which case the metaphors will change.
All right. Thanks for the answer.
All right, Tom, we're going to go over to Eric in a second. Listen, we've got a lot of questions, Tom. I know we're only looking at 25 more minutes originally, but are you all right to go for quite a while longer, Tom?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's just keep going. Fantastic. Eric, it's all yours.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My question is about physical pain. Does the larger consciousness system protect individuals from having to feel physical pain in situations where their bodies have to endure extreme physical pain for long periods of time? For example, in situations where people are tortured in terrible ways or for long periods of time, or when people have to die a particularly painful death. It seems to me that in extreme cases like these, after a certain point, physical pain loses its purpose and just creates pointless and unnecessary suffering for an individual. If the larger consciousness system doesn't protect individuals in these cases, does that mean that there's a lesson to learn from having to deal with it?
Okay, for the most part, and it depends on how we define the special cases, the answer is yes, the system does protect individuals from this. One let's say, you fall out of the 3rd story of a building, or let's make it the 10th story of the building and there's nothing below you but concrete. There's a very high probability that by the time you get to the concrete, you will no longer be conscious. You will lose consciousness. The system will spare you the impact of the concrete, being aware of it. So your consciousness will turn off before you get there. That sort of thing happens routinely, yes. So if there's some kind of a terrible physical thing that's about to happen, you tend to lose your consciousness before it happens. Okay, now, there's another way that consciousness can help, and that is that let's say you have a bad kidney, and that kidney causes you constant pain. And your only way to deal with it that medicine will give you is taking narcotics. And if you take narcotics, it ruins the rest of your life, because now you're kind of dopey all the time. Your relationships are all in a fog. You can't really relate to people or things. You can't function very well, but that's your choice. You either stay fogged out or you're in terrible pain. You can learn to control that pain with your intent. What happens is it doesn't make the pain disappear. It just makes the pain irrelevant. You become detached from the pain, and the pain is just there, and you can notice it. Yeah, it's there, but it doesn't bother you. You're detached from it. It's not bothersome. So that's the way the consciousness can help you in that kind of situation. Now, there are pain clinics that have for the last 30 years been teaching people to do this, to control their pain. People who have chronic pain and have that stay doped up on narcotics or be in excruciating pain, when they have that choice, they teach people to control it with their mind, but they're not always successful. Some people will learn it and learn it very quickly. Other people don't seem to be able to learn it at all. And that has to do mostly with the level of fear that they have. If they're very fearful people, then it's more difficult for them to set that aside and detach themselves from it. So that's then another lesson, right? You need to let go of that fear. So it doesn't always work, and some people take the drug route, and some people maybe just put up with the pain. But your consciousness can take away pain, and it does take away pain in those critical moments, so that you don't have to experience the smushing against the concrete. Even if it's only a very short experience, it still wouldn't be a nice experience. So you your mind disappears. You're gone already.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you very much, Tom.
All right, Tom, well, listen, we're going to go back to Vanessa's group. Vanessa, if you can hear me, I understand Matthew and David have questions. If they want to step up to the mic and give it their best shot.
Okay, yeah, we have Shelby. Shelby's actually going to ask a question.
Fine.
Hi, Tom. I was just, I'm not sure if I'm going to say this the right way or not, but I'm wondering if there's any connection between all of the children that have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, more or less in the last, particularly 5 to 10 years, and their connection with the greater consciousness system, when we look at just the fact that they have difficulty speaking and communicating with so many people around them. What I found with, especially my son has it, and a lot of the kids that he communicates with seem to be that he has the best connection with also are on the spectrum. So just given the fact that they have difficulty speaking, and also just the fact that they like to be silent, and it seem to be overwhelmed with noise, and sometimes when there's not a lot of noise there, do they have a greater or an easier connection to the greater consciousness system than the rest of us would?
Yes, just because you have autism, doesn't mean that you're mentally impaired. It's you still have a very bright mind in there that is processing information. It just doesn't process it in the normal way. So autistic children, for the most part, are also bright children that are processing information. We just don't know all that they are, because they're not very communicative, so we don't really know what's going on in their heads. and they have a real hard time connecting to our physical reality in the way that most people connect. And our reality is just not very, not very well designed for them. It's designed for those of us that are, quote, normal, unquote, and people who are not normal have a real hard time dealing with this world, because this world is made just for we normal people, and the other people kind of get left behind. So do they have a larger connection? That's a question I hadn't thought of before, but I can explore it for a minute. I'd say in many cases the answer is yes. They have other avenues of information available to them that we don't have. It's not like they just don't have what we have and there's nothing there to fill that up. That's kind of what we imagine, because we're not really used to, or have any sense of what they might have. But they get data, they get information that they can process, and that data doesn't necessarily make a lot of good sense and is not necessarily very useful here, but it is a reality in which they live, and they do make connections with the larger consciousness system and with other people. And they make connections with people in ways that you don't know. They have relationships with people that I guess only they understand that relationship well. But we see a lot more autistic children now than we used to see. And there's some idea that it must have some environmental effect, because suddenly we're seeing so much of it. And that may be true. But having an autistic child is a learning situation for the parents and for everybody that interacts with that child.
Yeah, I know, baby. I know, sweetie. It's
okay. It gives you pause to think in terms of a bigger picture when you deal with autistic people. You can't force them to come into your reality, you see, and you can't necessarily go into their reality. So you have to learn to care and to love and to give in this some sort of between space. You can't get into their reality. They really can't get into your reality, at least not comfortably. So it puts a lot of effort has to go for both sides to learn to have a bigger picture of all of that and deal with it in a very positive way. So I think that parents of autistic children probably learn a whole lot that parents that don't have autistic children never think about, places they never go and never experience. So you can see that there is a positive aspect to it if we deal with it positively rather than deal with it negatively, which means usually when you deal with it negative, it's like, well, we're going to try to force them to be like us. And, the forcing factor, we'll give them drugs and we'll force them to, to behave according to our model. That's probably not a very productive viewpoint. But rather than let them be the way they be, give them the love and a safe space, and then let them become whatever they can become, and try to share as much of that as you can with them, but gently and lovingly. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of my thoughts on that subject. You're muted. You have to turn your mute off.
No, and actually, I think one of the things that you actually answered an extra question that I never thought to ask, and that's can we be?
No, don't bite.
I think that's something I've always wondered as well, because we are on the different realities. So thank you.
I missed that. Would you tell me that again? One question that you didn't think to ask was what?
Well, I didn't answer it actually. I was wondering whether we can go into their reality since they have such a difficult time in ours. So,
yes, yes, you can actually, but you can do that only mentally. You can't do it intellectually, but you can feel it. You can feel them, and you can feel their emotions, and you can go kind of connect with their mind, and you'll feel things, but you won't be able to interpret it very well.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom.
Vanessa, do you have anyone else in your group ready to go?
Yeah, Daniel would like to ask a question.
Okay.
Hi, Tom. So my question is, you're talking about fear a lot, and many people live in fear, and that holds them back. You know, all the greatness. I'd like to hear from you how we could help someone identify what their fears are, and are there any unique ways of getting them to overcome it?
Okay, I can tell you more easily how you can identify your own fears, how you can help somebody else identify their fears. I think we talked about you can only help somebody else by giving them, choices and talking to them in generalities and letting them come to the choices that they have to make to deal with the fear. And all that has to be done in a very positive way. But dealing with your own fears is a different thing. You can find your fear by finding your ego. Fear is a tough one to catch because the things you fear you usually have buried very deeply, and you often will even deny that you have that fear or that you could have that fear. It's very difficult to find many of your fears. It's difficult to find many of your beliefs because you just believe it, and in your mind that's just the way reality is, and there's no questioning it, so you don't really see it as a belief, you see it as a fact. But ego is a different thing. Ego is just as obvious as anything. Is it about you? That's ego. Is it about, is the choice about you, about your needs, your want, the way you know it should be? Is it about other? Is it really just about how you can help, how you can be of service, what you can do to make things better for somebody else? You see, so all the times we have negative feelings, every time we feel, insecure, unhappy, angry, upset, stressed out, those are times that we can subscribe to ego. It's about us. Fear is always about us, and fear creates ego and belief, and the ego is always about us. And when we feel those negative feelings, they have roots in a fear. So you find yourself getting angry or being upset or feeling, left out or looked over or not appreciated, then there's a fear behind that. So you've just found an ego expression. Look for the fear. Why do you feel left out? Why do you feel unappreciated? And then you'll come up with a little short, ego answer to that. Well, I feel left out because everybody got up and left, and now I'm out, of the group, and But why does that upset you? You see, why is that a big deal? Why does that make you feel bad? Well, now you'll start getting to the fear. The fear will be something like, well, you feel inadequate, or you feel insecure, you have low self-esteem, and you have other things like that that are based on a fear. And now once you've found the fear, it's a matter of courage to get over it. You have to face it, accept it. And by accept it doesn't mean, well, there it is, I guess I can't get rid of it. That's not what I mean by accept it. By accept it, I mean own it. And then you just have to work on getting rid of it. And it takes a while. You just have to keep working at it, and you'll fail the first 10 or 20 times you try, and you just keep working at it, and eventually it goes away. You get rid of it. And then you feel like the weight's just been taken off. Your life is so much easier now without that fear. You've just taken back a big piece of your decision space rather than that fear running your choices for you. You're making them yourself. And that's a really good feeling. And those things that used to make you angry just don't make you angry anymore. You don't see it that way anymore. So you can't really tell somebody else what their fear is. Well, you can, I guess, if they're very good friends of yours, or if you're a counselor that they come to find out those kinds of things. But generally, you just can't walk up to somebody and say, well, you're really annoying. You've got this big fear and you need to fix it. That won't help them do anything of the sort. That'll just make them defensive and in denial, and it'll make it worse. So you can't do that. You have to let them discover it on their own. And usually you make that happen just by caring for them. Make it obvious to them that what they're doing is negative. And you do that by just giving to them and let them do what they do, And if there's no threat, then there doesn't have to be a defense. And if there's defense, then they can see what it is they're doing.
Cool. Vanessa, one more? She's coming.
Yolanda? Okay, I'll ask. Oh, can you turn that down? Okay. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Vanessa.
Oh, I have so many questions, like always. Oh, they're just gonna. Thank you. I guess sugar. That's my question. I've taken out sugar, all refined sugar, and I'm curious to know about dried fruit and also exercise, if you can. You really influenced me and motivated me to take out sugar just by hearing your talks, and I'm wondering if you might be able to say something that would motivate me or influence me to get into a daily active routine of exercise.
Okay, well, good that you've gotten rid of the sugar. Have you noticed the effect of that yet?
Yeah, I have. A little more focused.
Yeah, it's usually it's a pretty big effect for most people. And sometimes you don't notice it until you have an accident and you eat some sugar, and then suddenly you realize what your world used to be like, you know, that you are in a fog because of it. But yes, exercise is very important. Exercise, you know, your avatar has to follow a rule set. And our avatar functions well only if we use it. If it just sits and watches TV and we don't use it, we don't exercise it, then it loses its function. And as it loses its function, that provides fewer choices for your consciousness, because now your conscious can only do, you know, these things. Instead of being able to do all 20 of these things, now I can only do 10 of them because the avatar really doesn't support other things, because the rule set has degraded what it is can do. You will be able to do more mentally and physically if you exercise. So it will help your mind as well. You will think better. You will feel better. You will be more positive. You'll have a better outlook on life. All those things will work better, because as you're healthy, you know, you have this brain. Now, it's a virtual brain, but the virtual brain sets constraints on what the conscious can do with it. The conscious can only do what the avatar allows it to do according to the rule set. Well, if your brain is healthy, making connections, your body's healthy and all connected, then your consciousness can do a lot more. If that brain is, you know, cloudy with sugar, or cloudy with inactivity, or cloudy with watching too many sitcoms on TV, then the conscious just can't do as much with it. It's like it's working with a, you know, with a machine that doesn't work very well. That's very limited. So by keeping physically fit, you minimize the constraints that the conscious has to work with. And those are mental as well as physical constraints. So exercise is really important. Now, you're young, and you can get by without doing a lot of exercise for a while because you're young. And when you're young, you mostly get exercise as living your life. You know, you're active, you do things and so on. The older you get, the more the lack of exercise will affect you. The more it will deteriorate the choices you can make. And it's difficult to come back from that. In other words, you can let your body degrade, and then later on you can say, oh, that wasn't smart. Now I'm going to have to pick the body back up. But you'd be a lot better off if you had never let it degrade in the first place. If you'd kept it up, then you'll do better than if you just try to fix it, because fixing it never fixes it 100%. You can fix something, you know, if you work hard at it, you'll fix it 90% or maybe even 95%, but it's hard to fix it to 100%. So now you let it degrade again, and then you can only fix it 80% of that 80%. You know, now you're down to like 60% of what it would be if you had, you know, kept it going all the time. So you want to stay healthy, and you want to stay active, and you want to stay fit to minimize the constraints that your consciousness has to work with. So it's an important thing to do. You'll feel better. When you're fit, you'll feel better. Things will be more positive. It's easier for you to deal with stress it's easier for you to deal with people being rude or, you know, doing things that would otherwise annoy you. You're better able to deal with it because your consciousness has fewer constraints. So you go, girl, get out there and start walking off those miles, or, you know, doing whatever you have to do.
Right on. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate that.
All right, Tom, I'm going to ask the next question. DM795 has given me a question to ask. He says, could you please ask Tom about meditation, especially if he feels that transcendental meditation is still valuable to learn in growing our consciousnesses, especially if people are new to meditation or if other methods such as binaural beats or mindfulness haven't worked as well?
Okay, meditation is basically getting acquainted with your own consciousness and learning to operate. It's like an operator's manual, you know, to your consciousness. So that's what meditation does. And the result that you're looking for is that you can maintain a state of clearness. You can maintain a state where you have no thoughts running through your head, just a clear, empty state. And you can maintain that for, you know, first it's probably like 2 minutes, you know, and then a thought comes in. Well, then you keep working on it, and then it's 10, and then it's 20. You'd like to be able to maintain that for as long as you want, you know, for a half an hour, say, or an hour, but at least more than a few minutes. If you can get it up to 15 minutes, that's functional. If you can just keep your mind clear for 15 minutes, you can do a lot of things with it. But if you can't keep it clear for more than 10 or 15 seconds, then it's really hard to get it to behave, to do what you want. So that's what meditation's all about. It's just getting acquainted with your own consciousness and letting all the noise go, all the yammering, and that's mostly your intellect and your judging and your analysis. Just let all that go. That intellect is constantly yammering away, and that's what you want to avoid. You want to just exist at the being level. So where you just are, you're not at the intellectual level. So that's the point of meditation. Now, meditation doesn't have to be anything in particular. You can meditate just sitting quietly someplace, eyes wide open, just sitting quietly. You can meditate. Mostly people find it easier with their eyes shut because then that shuts out, you know, a visual field that they are not tempted to analyze or think about or, you know, operate on. But other people can leave their eyes open and they just don't really see what it is they're looking at. You know, they just kind of shut that data off. You can meditate with music. You can meditate with art. You can meditate without anything, just in a quiet place. Eventually, you need to learn to meditate in not quiet places. You need to meditate standing up, lying down, standing on one foot, you know, in a bus, you know, walking through the park. You start to make your meditation more and more robust toward not having to have a special space. So you don't need the quiet, dark space. You don't need any rituals to meditate. You don't need any incense burning. You don't need any gongs playing or anything particular. You can just do it all by yourself with no rituals, and eventually get it strong. Meditate in different positions, different ways, different times, in crowds, out of crowds, while walking, you know, while lying down, all those things, and that will make it strong. Eventually, once you get very familiar with the larger consciousness system and with these meditation states, you won't need to meditate anymore. It'll be a part of your life. Another way to say that is that you're always meditating. You always have a part of you in a meditative state. So you never really leave it. You've got yourself in this state and you got part of you in another state. That's what you used to call your meditation state, and you can switch back and forth between them anytime you want. So you have no need to actually sit down and make an effort to meditate because you're there all the time and you're here all the time. So it becomes a part of your life rather than something you do occasionally. But that's like 10 or 20 years down the road. You know, it's not something that you're going to learn real quickly. So meditation is a very important thing. Whatever you do, however you do it, be able to sit clearly and just be a point of consciousness in the void. You see nothing, hear nothing, feel nothing, smell nothing. You are. It's like the Descartes moment, you know, you think, therefore you are, you know. I think, therefore I am. You just am, and that's all. There's nothing else. No thoughts, just exist, floating in the void. That's a very powerful state. It's a very relaxing state. It's a nice state. It's comfortable. You'll get a lot of energy out of it, and it's your doorway to everything else. Because once you get to that state, now your mind is quiet. It doesn't have, your intellect isn't yammering. You don't have thoughts coming in. Now you can form a powerful, clear intent for whatever it is, whether it's to heal someone or yourself or get information from the databases, to remote view, whatever it is, you can have that clear intent and out of that space. And now you come with power rather than with a fuzzy mind that's jumping all over the place. So that's really the key to meditation. Now, there are technologies that'll help. You play binaural beats. Go to the web, go to Google and put in binaural beat. And when you'll get to some sites that'll say free binaural beats. Well, go to some of those sites. One of them is called Gnarl, G-N-A-U-R-A-L, Gnarl. I don't know whether you pronounce the G or not. It sounds like gnarl, but it looks like gnarl. And there'll be a site that you can just make up your own binaural beat. And I just say that because that's one I use. I make up the binaural beats when I do my things at TMI. And that's the site I go to, make them up. But there's other sites that some of them are simpler, some of them are more complicated, but you don't have to buy them. You don't have to, you know, purchase them someplace. You can make your own. The point is experiment. Experiment with them. And the idea, I guess I could tell you about a binaural beat. A good binaural beat to have would be a bass frequency of about 212 hertz with a let's say 256, so base frequency of 256 with then sliding down to probably 128 hertz. And on that, at that 128 hertz, you want to have it go up and down through about a 4 hertz. You want a 4 hertz difference. So that means at each one, you want a 4 hertz difference. So at your base frequency of 256, you want 256 plus 4, okay? It's 260, or minus 4, either one, just 4 difference. And then as it goes down, as the frequency goes down to something a little lower, you always want to keep about a 4 hertz difference between the two tones. Binaural means two ears, bi and aural. And aural is hearing. So you want one tone in one ear in a headset, the other tone in the other ear in the headset. You want about 4 hertz difference between those two tones. And that's all you need. You have to listen to it with a headset because it's important that you get the two tones exclusively, one in each ear. Listening to it with a speaker will still work just a little, but it loses a lot of its power. So that's binaural beats. You can purchase them if you don't want to make them, but making them is pretty easy. It's a technology that will help and train your brain waves to the beat frequency, which is the difference frequency. In this case, it'll be 4 hertz. So it puts you in a theta state. If you had an EEG on your head measuring the brain waves, they would tend, the energy in the brain wave would tend to move to the theta state. That's what it does. It's helpful, but it's also like putting training wheels on your bicycle. Eventually you have to take the training wheels off, or you'll never be a good bike rider. Eventually you need to take, let the binaural beats go and just meditate on your own without the help. So it's a good learning tool though.
Good old binaural beats, Tom. Okay, going to Nathan next. Nathan, back to you. You started the evening off and you have another question, I believe, for Tom.
I do. Thank you so much. First of all, thanks, Tom, for going into overtime, and thanks for everyone for being here. This is awesome. I'll just read it just to keep things succinct. Thanks, Tom. I grew up in a religious context which recognized both positive and negative entities in the spiritual realm, and stories abounded in my childhood how people would dabble quite innocently in out-of-body experiences, Ouija boards, and other paranormal activities, and then would attract negative entities that would frighten and sometimes harass the people long-term. As I address my own fears, this is an important fear for me to face. You've addressed negative entities on the forum and in videos, but also not often or in detail out of a reported desire not to encourage fear of them. This is understandable. You have said it's very uncommon to run into problems with them unless you're around the wrong crowd, so to speak. But that goes against my early programming as a kid, however accurate or not it was. How can I work on this very ingrained fear? Thank you.
How can you work on it? Well, you know, if you have an ingrained fear and I tell you that, well, you know, you're probably not going to have any trouble, you know, that doesn't help, you see, because that's just all intellectual and that's not going to help you at all. I think, like most fears, if you want to work on it, if it's a fear you want to overcome, then it just takes the courage to do it. You may just have to do it and do it carefully. You know, it's like the courage to get into the swimming pool when you don't know how to swim. Well, the first thing, you just don't go run and jump into the middle. You know, that would be foolish. First thing you do is you go down to the shallow end, right? And you just get your feet wet, and then you get comfortable with that. And then you maybe go up to your knees, and you eventually get maybe up to your chin, but you're still standing on the ground. And then you learn to doggy paddle a few feet. And eventually you turn into a pretty good swimmer, but you do it gradually because you have the fear of the water. Well, this would be the same way. I'd say do it gradually and carefully. And I don't recommend you going out and getting a Ouija board and seeing what happens. That's probably not a good idea. But you should, if you want to get over this fear, then you have the courage to go out and interact with beings that are non-physical. And you can do that just from a meditation state and do it mostly from the intellect, which is hello. You know, anybody out there want to talk with me? Or you can have a little saying that you do. A lot of people use, what do they call them? I don't know, there's a name for it. It's a little saying you do, like, I only want to speak to those who would have my best interest, you know, at heart, to those who understand reality and love and caring, or are more advanced than I am, you know, in love and caring and so on, and would like to help me out. So you limit with your intent who it is you want to talk to. Okay, you don't just go, hey, anybody in there want to talk to me? Because now you've opened yourself wide up to anything that wants to say hello to you or wants to connect with you. So the best thing to do is come up with, you know, somebody can help me. What do we call those little phrases and stuff we make up? You can find one of them on the internet, but you can make one up. It basically limits your audience, the people you're willing to talk to just a certain set of people and with certain attributes. And you can make that up. It's better to make up your own than to use somebody else's, because when it's your own, you know exactly what you mean. And then your intent will be clear. So you use somebody else's, they're really somebody else's words, and it may not really suit you, so it won't be as good a fit. So do that, and then experience. Have some conversations. Don't judge whether it's real or you're making it up. Just have it until you get enough information where you can make that judgment. So I'd say go out under those kind of controlled circumstances and see how it works. The only thing that will get you, the only thing, you know, the only boogeyman out there that's going to get you is one that you connect with your fear. You see, it's fear is the connector. If you don't have the fear, there's no way to connect to you. You control your connections with your intent. If you only intend to connect to this person, that's all you'll connect to. Anybody else out there yammering, you won't hear them because you've only intended to connect to that person. So as long as your intent is clear, as long as you can hold your focus, and as long as you're not fearful, then you're good to go. You're safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. But you already come to it frightened because of your background. So you're going to have to deal with that fear carefully by very carefully intending just a certain audience, you know, even for certain purposes, if you will. You know, I want to know something about this, or I'd like to meet someone like this with these restrictions. So you can do that, and that'll work very well. And you just have to have the courage to try it out, but just try it out in small things. The people who often get in trouble are people who have a lot of fear, and they get something like a Ouija board or something, and they just completely open up and say, you know, talk to me, who's out there? You know, and they end up getting messages back, and eventually those messages end up frightening them. And then those messages, because they're frightened, that opens up a connection to all sorts of things, you see? So it's, the problem is to get your fear under control and go slowly. That's how you can probably beat the fear that you've got. Eventually it'll be old hat to you, but your own intent can shut anything down that you don't want. But now if you're terribly fearful, you're not really controlling your intent. Your fear is controlling your intent. And if your fear is controlling your intent, then it remains open to the things you fear. You see, that's the connection. So it's just get in the water slowly and practice with it until you build up some confidence that it's okay and nothing's really going to bother you. So, you know, somebody said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and that's really a good description of the way it is. So fear is a problem. Hey, Keith, I have an idea. You're going through all these questions. I'm sure you got a whole lot more, but there's a few people here that I've been looking at their faces now since we started, and they haven't had a chance.
I have been asking them, Tom. I've been asking them on the side if they have questions.
Okay.
I'm trying to get to them. We are actually, I'm going to take Trey next. Now, Trey, you met in Atlanta just about a year ago. After Trey, we will come to Sheila. Sheila will have a question for you. If anyone else does have a question, let me know on the board here. Type me a message, and we'll get round to them if we can. Okay, Nick, I know. So, Trey, it's all yours, and Sheila, after that, it'll be you. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to know, like, you know what I mean, if we visit another reality frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're, you know what I'm saying, and we're talking to entities and we're having an experience, what happens to our avatar in that reality frame if, say for instance, the alarm clock rings and we wake up? What happens to our avatar in that other reality frame at that moment?
Okay, so yeah, you're having a conversation with somebody in a non-physical, some other place, and your alarm clock goes off. What'll happen is that alarm clock will just break your connection, and you'll find yourself awake in your bed listening to the alarm clock ring. That other thing will just end. So it's just like hanging up the phone. You know, the connection's broken and just gone. Now you can maybe turn off that alarm and go back to it and reopen the connection if you want. But whatever disturbs the avatar, whatever disturbs your body, it'll pull you back. So if you're in another reality frame doing something and somebody, you know, throws a bucket of cold water on you, well, you're suddenly, all that's going to disappear and you're going to be right back here, because suddenly your attention goes from whatever you were doing, you know, your intent and attention goes to the alarm clock's ringing, or I'm suddenly wet and cold, and that occupies your intent and the other thing's gone. So it just, and if you're having a conversation with somebody and somebody throws, you know, in the non-physical, and somebody throws cold water on their avatar, they just suddenly will blink out. So you'll be right in the middle of something and then they're gone. So that's what happens. It's just your connection is by intent. And when your intent is no longer focused on that connection, it's focused on an alarm clock or a cold wetness, then it's just gone. Nothing happens. It can be redone. You know, it's not like it creates a problem. You can reconnect it if you wish, but it ends it. But that's the same thing when you have scary things that happen. You see, if you go out there and something scary happens and you get frightened, what happens? You always just come back. You just find yourself lying in your bed sweating, you know, because it was a scary thing. And it's not like you won't get back. You know, you could get out there and not get back. Some people have that sort of fear. That doesn't happen. As soon as you get some discomfort or something happens, your alarm clock goes off or somebody comes in the room or whatever, you're back. If you get into fear where you get into a panic about something, you're back, because your attention stops from the data stream you're in and goes back to the data stream where the alarm clock is. So that's the avatar is your source. That's where you're coming from. You are you are, you know, your consciousness still is still limited by what the avatar allows it to do. So the avatar is interested in you know, scratching its ear, you know, that'll come first because you just get this terrible itch, and that'll just kind of interrupt what you're doing, and you'll just have to scratch it and then go back to it. It'll interrupt.
Okay. One more quick question. As far as like the Bible, the stories in the Bible, you know, there were like entities like Jehovah, Allah, Satan, Lucifer, and all that. Were those entities that just tapped into our data stream, or were they fictional characters?
Well, you know, that's a good question. It's a question like, well, what's true? You know, what's reality? Well, all of us are just ones and zeros in a data stream that the consciousness is interpreting. So basically, you're saying, if you know, our reality is a data stream, and are these things in our data stream, or are they real? See, isn't really a good question. You know, if they're in our data stream, they're real. Okay, so our reality is a data stream. So these things can appear and go away because the system adds them to our data stream temporarily, or they can come and stay like our avatar does because they're part of the game now. You know, they're a logged on player in the game. So one of them, I think, is what you'd call real. They're like a logged on player in the game, and they're there full time until they die. And the other one is they're just in our data stream temporarily. Any of those things can happen. Those things may be also metaphors. You know, mostly you'll find old books talk in terms of metaphors. They talk in terms of poetry, things that had meaning to the people at the time. And now we read them and they're real confusing because we don't really get the metaphor. So best to kind of read between the lines there and say, well, what does this being symbolize? What is the significance? And that significance is the thing you need to go with, not, you know, the physical aspects of it. Those aren't really that important. So did these people see and hear these things? Or are they just metaphors that were made up afterwards? We'll never know. You see, we don't get that information. But it really doesn't make any difference because it's the meaning behind the metaphor that's important. What did they do? What did they bring? You know, what was different after, you know, they came and went? What was different? What did they add to it? That's what's important. Not really how they were instantiated into the data stream. So I'd say that, yeah, it could be any of those ways. Could just be metaphor. Could have been something the system did because we needed that. Could be that they were actually, you know, had blood and bone avatars. It's really hard to tell when you read a book that's, you know, 3,000 years old.
Okay, one more question. I'm out. Do you have a favorite reality frame that you have visited?
Yes, I have had some that were favorites that I go back to a lot. Of course, this one that I'm in is a favorite of mine as far as you know, staying here a long time. Most of the others that I had favorites in were more for visits. You know, like you really enjoy going to you know, Yosemite Park, so all your vacations you spend there because it's just a really nice place and you like it. It's like that. I've had some that were like that I went back to just because they were very enjoyable to be there. Some because there were people and entities there that I got to know and got relationship with and wanted to keep up with. But you know, mostly it's here because this is where I work.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this reality frame a lot, Tom. You know, this is where we work. It's found the right job at last, I think. Sheila's been waiting very patiently up in the corner of my screen. She has a great question for you. Sheila, it's all yours.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, Sheila.
As I said, I was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, and part of to fix it or help it was to quit sugar and change my diet and stuff. And I went on a 0 carb diet, and I felt great, and I lost weight, and I could think clearly, and all these health problems I had cleared up, and my pain from a back injury was better. And then I found out the reason I have early Alzheimer's is because I have the APOE gene from both parents, and I'm not supposed to eat any fat, that I can't process fat or something they're saying now. And so I have to quit eating meat and fat. And I read that you are a vegetarian, and I wondered, did an entity tell you to, you know, when you were out there, did you learn that, or did you get that from stuff that you've read and learned about here? Or
no, I became a vegetarian because of 2 things, and I'm health conscious. I do exercise a lot. Vanessa, you need to note that. I exercise about 2 hours a day, and sometimes more. And being health conscious, I watch what I eat, and I try to eat mostly raw fruits and vegetables because that's kind of the basic good diet. I try to limit carbohydrates as well, and I don't take any kind of sugar at all. But the reason that I let go of meat was, one, meat is, from we just look at it as a health aspect, meat is one of the more polluted foods that we get, because most of our meat is basically produced in, what do we call them, factory farms, where the animals are fed whatever makes the most money for the owner. And they're pumped up with hormones and antibiotics and all sorts of things so that the owners will make more money, because they get the market quicker, they're heavier, they're less trouble to take care of if they process quickly. So meat is a very polluted food. Right now, fish is also a very polluted food because the oceans are very polluted. So the source of meat, if you just go buy meat, is not really very, very healthy because of all the junk that you can find in it. Now, that being said, then that would leave meat that was, raised on somebody's little farm in a natural way, organic, and, they eat the grass rather than being fed, a chemical mixture. Then that would leave that okay. But then I had a problem with that, not on health grounds, but on moral grounds, that I didn't want to be responsible for killing things for my own pleasure. Eating is a pleasure. It's also a necessity. And if it was just a necessity for me, in other words, I lived in the woods 300 years ago, and I had a bow and arrow or a rifle, and I had to live by killing other things. That was my source of food primarily. To get through the winter, you'd have to kill things to eat them. Well, then there's no problem there, because eating is a necessity. But I can get by just fine and be very healthy without doing that. So if I eat meat, it's not because I need it, it's because it pleases me. It tastes good, I like it, it's a habit. Well, to kill something because it pleases me, I didn't like the feel of that. That wasn't, to me, a moral decision to have something killed. I don't kill it myself. Of course, I have somebody else kill it in the slaughter yard someplace, and I get it, but I'm still responsible because I feed the demand that requires it to be killed in the slaughterhouse. So I let meat go, and I didn't really miss it at all. I was never really a big meat eater, but it just didn't make that much difference. Now, I exercise strenuously. I lift weights 5 days a week, and weightlifters eat a lot of protein. Well, I don't eat a lot of protein that's extra, but I get by, and I'm doing fine. We have Olympic class athletes that are vegan, that don't eat meat, and don't eat any dairy either, and they seem to be fit and physically doing very well. We have a whole nation mostly in India, where there's few meat eaters and they're not unhealthy. So you can live a healthy life without eating the meat. So that's why I gave up. That's why I gave up meat. I first gave it up. Well, I first cut it back to just organic meat because I didn't think it was very healthy. And then I let the organic meat go because I didn't think it was very nice to kill things just to have the pleasure of eating them. That seemed like not a good reason for killing something.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sheila. That was actually a really good question. Thank you. Sandra, you're up next.
Hi, Tom. It's great having you here. And I am fairly new to you and your work, and saw you a few months back in Atlanta. And we talked then about tools, and you mentioned use whatever tools help you to basically overcome your fear and explore whatever works best for you. So I've been doing that, whether it's hiking in nature or meditating. And there's a specific meditation through Dr. Joe Dispenza that I've been doing. He has different meditations with blessing of the energy centers. And one is a breath work of moving energy up from the first chakra to the crown chakra. And one of them, though, I'm having an issue with based on some of the things I heard you say, and not sure. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. And it's basically about using intent to tune into new potentials and basically the law of attraction in a sense. And I know you've mentioned some negative things about law of attraction, but just wanted to, let's see what I wrote down here. Just wanted to know what your thoughts were about having desires, intentions, preferences for different life experiences. And then also your thoughts on surrendering to the magic of the system or the universe as well, and how that interacts and interplays.
Okay. Well, it depends on, the quality of your intent. If your intent is a good one, if it's a low entropy intent, it's an intent that's not fear-based, it's not ego and belief driven, then what you create is going to be good because your choices will be love-based. And if they're love-based, then whatever you create in your reality with your intent will be a good thing to create. So yes, feel free to, let the larger conscious system know, what you would like to experience next, and perhaps even why you'd like to experience that next, and what the point is. Certain areas of growth that you'd like to go in, or certain things you'd like to be able to understand, and put it out there that, this is a path you'd like to take, things you'd like to do, and things will begin to happen to move you in those paths. So in that way, yes, it's a very good thing to do. The only thing that's really negative about that, if you start using your intent just to manipulate things here, you start using your intent to, make the people in your life, do what you want them to do. You start using your intent to raise the probability that the boss is going to give you the raise rather than, the other people in your group, that sort of thing. That is now using your intent in a self-centered way that isn't going to help you grow up. Actually, it helps you grow down. It helps you, de-evolve rather than evolve. You're taking your intent and employing it in the service of ego and fear. So as long as it's employed in the service of caring and love, then there isn't anything you can intend that's going to go bad there. It's all going to be good. So that's, that's really, it depends on the quality of your intent. If your quality intent is good, then whatever you want, it'll be for a good reason, and let the system know about it, and the system will try to help you if the system agrees that it's a good reason. If the system thinks that it's actually going to hurt you or be a problem, the system may resist that. So that's kind of about the idea of the law of attraction. What was your other? You had a second question.
Is that also then when the system helps, that's when synchronicity starts
Yes.
coming into place? And yeah.
Yes, when the systems helps you, that's how it helps you. You know, the synchronicity. You can't just come out and you know, do something that is a conflict with the rule set. So what happens is we get synchronicity. Little things happen, and nobody would be able to really prove that it wasn't just a normal thing that just was by luck happened to happen. But after you've had lots of these things, you know that it isn't, because it happens to be something you just asked for, and then there it is. So that's how the system will help you. It'll help you to help you take the next step that you need to take.
But you would advise kind of having focused intent versus just complete surrender and to the.
Well, there's another, now there are two different things. Focused intent, you can have that, and you can have surrender. They're not an either or. You can have both. Okay. You can surrender in as much as, you know, when you say surrender, let me reinterpret that as stop trying to be in control. You let go of control. So rather than you trying to control things or control people or control situations, you just let it happen the way it happens. That kind of surrender. Things happen, you deal with it. You don't worry so much about what the things are that happen. You focus on dealing with it well. Okay, so that sort of surrender is a good thing. We stop trying to manipulate everything and control everything and make everything happen the way we know is best. And of course, that puts us in direct conflict with other people who are all trying to manipulate it the way they know is best. And if you just let that go, you're much better off. But that doesn't mean at the same time you can't have a thought about, well, here's a way in which I'd like to develop myself. Here's some experiences I'd like to have. I think I could learn a lot from this, and I'd like to do that. Well, you can keep that intent there. That's not manipulating your environment. You see, that's not trying to control things. So there's no reason why you can't do both. They're not really exclusive. They sound like they're exclusive in that if you just give up everything, then you don't ask for anything. Well, that's probably excessive. You know, it's probably not a good idea. It's not, if you make it an either or, you're probably out of balance. A balance of these things is actually better. So you need to surrender your need to control, which is fear-based. You fear that if you don't control it, it'll go bad. You know, you have to keep manipulating it to make things come out right. So you let go of that fear and you just let things happen the way they do, but you can still have some input as to what you'd like to see happen, but it's a gentle input. It's not like you're driving for a particular conclusion. You have this general output about good things. I'd like to learn to be more forgiving. Okay, so I need some lessons in forgiveness. You know, that's something I really would like to learn. Well, things will happen that will give you lessons in forgiveness, so you might be careful about that one. But anyway, yeah, you can use them both. I think trying to make them exclusive is probably unnecessary. There's no real advantage in it. If you completely surrendered to where you make no choices at all, well, you've given away your free will. You don't want to make no choices at all. You're here to make choices and to learn from the choices. So you need to stay involved in making choices. So the total surrender, I think, is kind of going too far. You're out of balance at that point. It's all right, perhaps, if you're a monk or a nun and you're cloistered and somebody else is feeding you and somebody else is sheltering you and somebody else is paying the utility bill, and your whole job is just to sit there and surrender and let go. Well, that then might make sense. But if you live in this world and have to take care of yourself and pay your own bills and that sort of thing, and have responsibilities to children and to spouses and whatever, then I think you need to not be so hard over on either one, but a combination of those two makes more sense.
So you're fine with the idea of having an intention if you want to have a mystical experience, if you want a change in your career, a change in your relationship, but leave it up to the system.
Yes, yeah, have that intention, but the intention ought to be for a good reason. You know, it's not just, well, I'm getting bored with this guy, you know, I'd like a change in relationship. Well, that's an ego problem of yours to deal with. See, that wouldn't be a good thing. But if you're saying, you know, I'm in a rut here, things just, you know, every day seems like just like every other day, I need to get out of this rut. Could you help me get me out of the rut? Now, you don't know what's going to happen. Could be all sorts of things could happen. You know, you don't know what that is, but things will happen that will probably take you out of the rut if that's sincere and that's what you want. But again, be careful what you intend, because later you don't get to say, oh, no, that's not what I meant. You know, yeah, I wanted to get out of the rut, but I didn't want to go bankrupt, you know, and have to go live under the bridge. That really gets me out of the rut, but wow, it's not what I had in mind. You see, you kind of have to take the way it comes, and you need to be very open so that whatever the system decides how you can learn this, that you'll learn it with humility. You're not looking for something particular. So no, there's no problem with you doing those kinds of things with the right attitude. Now, if you're just trying to program your life, that's a bad idea, because now you're not just living, dealing with things as they happen and making choices. Now you're trying to design the things that happen for you. You see, now you're back into control again. Well, I want to do this, you know, I want to do that. First, I want to win the lottery. Then I want somebody to give me a new Mercedes. Then I'd like to have a job that pays me, I'll say, $500,000 a year, and I don't have to really do anything. And then I want this and that. And you're starting now to program a life that's degenerate, that isn't going to help you grow up, you see. So it just, again, it's the quality of your intents.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Tom, we're going to go back to Vanessa's group in a second. Tim, if you're ready to go, you have one more question. Or would you rather Tom do it another time, Tim?
It's actually quite a short one. I was actually just going to ask, I find it quite strange how there's a necessity for a transition from this PMR to NPMR. Once the restrictions of our brain are lifted, why is this process necessary? Why can't we just flash to another system and have the information which is stored there take over? It seems like maybe the answer is the fractal nature of reality, but to what extent is our experience here similar to the experience elsewhere? What's the connection? That makes any sense.
Okay.
How universal?
I'm not sure that last part made sense to me, but let me try the first part. Is why do we need a transition? Well, depends on the individual. Some people need a long and lengthy and handheld transition, and other people need almost no transition at all. It depends on the individual.
Is the transition very similar to what we feel in terms of emotions? How universal is our experience as a human? I mean, for example, is humor a universal experience?
Yes, we do have universal experiences like that. Humor would be one of them. Sadness would be another. There are the transitions we make when an avatar dies have to do, and the reason they have to be kind of slow transitions is that the consciousness needs a sense of continuity. You know, if you're in A and going to B, it's startling to instantaneously be in B, because you have to get your bearings down. It's like, oh, where am I now? Is this B? How did I get here? You know, it kind of startles the system. So basically, when you are coming from this kind of a reality where everything is buttoned down according to the rule set, suddenly be in a reality where that rule set doesn't apply anymore is a little strange. And just just for the sake of continuity, so you kind of have a path from A to B rather than just disappear here and appear there, is more calming, more reassuring for people. It doesn't freak them out. They don't get upset by it. But now, if you're to the point to where that transition can be abrupt and it's not a problem for you, then it can be abrupt. You can disappear at A and appear at B and go right on with your business, and there is no shock to the system because you don't have a problem with that.
So then the real question is, why is the experience of NPMR so human-like? Why are these experiences so universal when physically they do you see what I mean now?
Yeah, well, yes. The reason your experiences in NPMR are very human-like is because you have to interpret the data.
Yes. So it's not actually like that. Then.
You only interpret the data based on your experience base. Whatever your experience is what you have to use to interpret the data. So you're here in this physical virtual reality, according to this rule set. That's how you understand the world. That's what your metaphors mean to you. And you have an experience now. You're out of body and you're getting this experience. You have to interpret that experience in terms of what's in your experience. And your experience is living here within this rule set. So suddenly you're interpreting your experience of what did I see, what did I hear, what did I smell, what did I feel, and it's right back to your 5 physical senses is how you interpret the data you get. So that then tends to make everybody who comes from this virtual reality and our rule set tends to interpret things similarly because we all live in the same rule set. If you come from a different place with a different rule set, you wouldn't necessarily interpret it that way. Your metaphors would be quite different. So that's why there's kind of a fundamental humanness to what happens in the larger reality, because that's how we interpret it. That's what we know.
But there are these fundamental experiences.
Yes, there are some fundamental experiences. Now, when you are, I'm trying to think of some of the beings I've been with in a larger conscious system that never have been in a buttoned-down virtual reality like ours. They've always been in the very loose rule set virtual realities. They're different in the sense they don't have the same sort of sense of humor, because a lot of our sense of humor, again, has to do with how we interpret things. But they do have a sense of irony and a sense of amusement and that kind of stuff. You're not likely to get a belly laugh out of them because they've never had a belly. So it's expressed a little differently, but yeah, it's still there. It's still there. They have a sense of humor. They can appreciate a good joke.
I think that's very important. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go over to Vanessa's group one last time. They've been sitting there patiently. I think Yolanda has one of the last questions. Hi, Yolanda.
Hello. Hi, Tom. I know you always talk about special relationships and optimal loving relationships. And I would like to know some tips and practical applications for an optimal loving relationship that is according to your theory.
Okay, and you're talking about the relationship of significant other, I take it. Yeah. Okay, perhaps a romantic relationship. The optimal relationship is one where what's important to you is what you can give, not what you can get. Okay, and it's optimal if both of you feel that way. Now, if you both don't feel that way, it will be as optimal as it can get, even if just you feel that way. You see? So you know, with 2 people, it's not necessarily that both people are going to be on the same sheet of music there. So if you can optimize it as much as you can, just by you being loving, caring, supportive, it's about the other person. What can you do to make them feel better, make them, feel cared for, make them, be happy? So you make the other person happy, and making them happy is what makes you happy. So that's the optimal relationship, and that's for both male and female. You know, if it's a heterosexual relationship, the reason that you optimize it, even if it's just you who are optimizing. Let's say you have a relationship with somebody, and that person is very self-centered. It's still good for you to optimize it by being very giving, because when you are giving, you produce this environment of safety, this environment of support to the other person, and it allows them to see their self-centeredness as self-centeredness and grow out of it more easily than anything else you can do. If you want, you know, if the most optimal is that they get rid of their self-centeredness, the way you do that is for you not to be self-centered. It's for you to give to it. Now, that doesn't always work. It usually works, but occasionally you'll run into people who are just not nice, and they don't grow up, and they are maybe abusive. Well, in that case, you have to realize that this isn't working. You've given them much of an environment of safety and support as possible, and they're not growing up. They're taking that and abusing it. Then it's time that you had a relationship with somebody else. You see, somebody that had more potential to grow with you than that person. So no, don't stay in an abusive relationship. But most people aren't just abusive by nature. Most people are abusive because they're fearful. They're afraid somebody's going to get them, do something to them, take advantage of them, hurt them. And they have all of this fear, and that's why they're self-centered. And if you give them a really safe space, they start seeing that self-centeredness and that fear just for what it is, rather than being defensive and that fear is protecting them. That chip on their shoulder is their protection against the ugly outside world. Well, when you give them a lot, then that world isn't ugly anymore. It's a beautiful world. And they can start seeing that their fear is getting in the way and isn't working well and is causing distress, and they can change it, you see. So that's why you being giving is the optimal thing that you can do in a relationship. Now, typically when I talk to couples, I tell them that if you want to experiment with this, then let the guy be the leader and experiment, and let him make it his mission to make his woman happy and to keep her that way. And just let him take charge of that first, and then see how the situation grows. Now, he can't do that like a puppy dog. That's not the point. He has to be in charge. He has to take charge of it. He has to make her happy based on things he chooses to do, not just tell me what you want next, dear, and I'll do that. You see, now that's not the thing. He's not making choices. He's just following somebody else's advice. That's not growing, and he's not going to get there with that. He has to make the choices on his own, out of his own free will, because that's what he thinks would make you happy. Now, he'll learn if it doesn't make you happy, it makes you sad instead, then he'll learn that wasn't a good choice, and he'll learn from that. So you know, that way he's in charge of making you happy, and you're in charge of just being, just interacting and being who you are, being honest, being authentic, expressing exactly how you feel. And that's the way I generally talk to couples about it, because it works better that way. Female will more quickly, given a safe space, start to grow herself up. That's more in her nature to do that than it is the other way around. That's why I generally start with the guy in charge, because it's more likely that that his woman is going to grow up more quickly. The woman's in charge. Guys have a tendency to get a little lazy and say, wow, things are good. Let me just kick back and enjoy this. And it'll take them a little longer before they get to the point where they say, oh, my behavior here is getting kind of dysfunctional. I need to clean up my act. They'll get there just the same, but they won't get there quite as quickly. So the whole thing works better if he leads and he makes it his mission in life to make choices that make you happy. Period. So if you have a problem and something bothers you, his job is to fix it. And not by telling you that that problem isn't really a problem, it's not a good problem, you shouldn't, feel that, not fixing it by explaining to you why you're wrong, but fix it by fixing it by making his own choices. It'll fix it, you see. So if you say, gee, I'd really like to repaint the bedroom purple, his job is to make you happy and paint it purple, not to argue with you that he doesn't want to live in a bedroom that's purple, you see. He just paints it purple because there's no downside to that. If he doesn't want to paint it purple, then it's all about him, not about you. So see, what I'm doing is making people think about what it's like to be working and making relationships from love rather than from ego. So if it's about other, then purple, why not? Purple makes you happy, sweetheart. I'll make it purple. We'll put yellow polka dots on it if you like that, because it makes her happy, you see. If it's all about you, then that's the way it is. But if it's about him, then it's, I don't like purple. Oh, that's, I don't want to live in a purple bedroom. That's not nice, and so then it's about him, not about you. So you see, so we want to get into the habit of it being about other. That means it's about love. You see, if it's conditional, I'll love you as long as you don't paint the bedroom purple, you see, then that's conditional love, and it's not really love at all. It's a deal. It's an arrangement. I'll do this for you if you do that for me, you see. And those arrangements just don't work for a long time because people change. And if you're lucky, that'll end up where you're both friends, but that's about it. If you're unlucky, it means you end up fighting and having problems and get unhappy with each other. But living a conditional love is not love at all. It's a deal. It's an arrangement. It's a business. It's a business of not being lonely. You connect with somebody else so you're not lonely anymore, and then you make these deals about what each other have to do, and you argue with each other all the time to try to get more of it your way and less of it their way. Well, that's all self-centered. So to optimize your relationship, start out with becoming love in the sense that you only care about what makes them happy. You see? So what happens? Let's say he does that, and you say, I want my bedroom painted purple with yellow polka dots, and he does it. And then you say, well, and I'd like you, to do this and that, and he does that too. And then he does other things to try to make you happy. And pretty soon, you have him stepping and fetching and, doing everything. You're lying on the couch drinking a mint julep while he vacuums, because that's what makes you happy, you see. And then you start thinking, I'm not behaving very well. I'm being really self-centered. I'm really taking advantage. And this isn't going to work, and it's going to blow up in my face. So then you start growing up, you see. So even if a person starts by taking advantage, they start to grow up afterwards because they see the dysfunction of it. So it's not a matter that, again, it's not a matter that you tell him what you want and he tries to do it. He's not going to be your slave. It's that he makes his own choices about what would make you happy. And he does that, and you give him feedback, you see. So otherwise, it's not his choice making. You don't want to take his free will away. You don't want a slave, you want a man, and there's a big difference there. So you don't want to have to tell him. If you have to tell him, it doesn't count, right? He has to come up with it on his own. So that's kind of the advice to couples and to people. Make it a real love relationship, not something that's conditional. Give to it, and don't worry about, well, if I do this, will it take advantage of me? Will I lose? Will I get what I need? Well, let your needs go. It's not about you, about your needs. Let them satisfy themselves. You see, your needs will be satisfied automatically if you can satisfy his needs. His needs will be satisfied automatically if he can satisfy your needs, because by satisfying your needs, puts you in a mood to satisfy his needs, you see, and it just grows like that, rather than the constant struggle to see who can get more of their way. That's just a disaster. that gets worse with time, not better.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, you know what, Tom? This has been the most wonderful 3 hours. It has absolutely flown by. We've had great questions. Thank you for everyone for joining us. You know, it's the best turnout we've ever had. And at one point, we did have 38 people taking part. We appreciate you all taking your time out of your busy lives to join us. Well done, Darren. The technology worked really well. So I want to try something. Darren, can you unmute all the microphones? Let's try and have a group chat. We'll face it out here. I know there's been some information going on in the side, Tom, about the new book, about your primal man, primal woman, or primal male, primal female. So I'm going to open it open to everyone to just chat, and we'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Well done, Darren.
Yes, Darren. Thank you, Darren. That was really nice you put it together. I hope somebody has recorded this, because we've had a lot of really good questions that will be useful to a lot of people. And hopefully this will go out so that other people, the 10,000 or 20,000 that would need this, would get a chance.
Everyone's gone quiet.
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little more. I appreciate everybody coming. It's been a really neat thing. I think we've had a lot of good questions. And
This was super cool, you Tom. Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks, Tom. It was great talking to you again.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Tom, what is the latest on the book, Tom? People are asking, what is the latest on the book? I know you've been busy and you find time not to get to it. It always pops up.
No, I've been working on it in my head, but I haven't put anything down on paper for a long time. And when I retire again for the 4th time, I'm going to spend my time working on that book, and I'll get it done. Right now, I'm still just gathering information and keeping my eyes and ears open and trying to figure everything out as I go.
Yeah, but if we let you have the time, we don't seem to ever let you have the time. We're always taking you somewhere, doing something with all these wonderful people.
One day, Keith, I'm going to say, no, I'm retiring again. I'm not going to do that anymore.
You're going to go to that vacation spot you mentioned?
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to say, and I think on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for all of your teachings and just taking the time to help us. You've been a major influence in all of our lives, and we're really, really thankful for having the opportunity to speak with you one-on-one right now. We've been meeting every week, once a week. We watch your videos and we discuss them, and I think we've all learned a lot from your teachings. So to be able to ask you questions in person has been a wonderful opportunity. We really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Okay, where's my hand? There it is. You're welcome, all of you.
We'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We've had a great time, and we hope you have too. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, guys.